Welcome, everyone. Happy New Year, and welcome to another episode of the Progress City Radio Hour. I am Jeff Crawford, and with me, as always, is my brother, Michael. Michael, Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you as well. Here's to a much less stressful year for us all. Hope you had a good holiday.
Oh, great holiday. It was fun to relive some of our favorite VHS moments from the 80s, and of course, all our guests, their Christmas special was fun, and our actual Christmas was a blast. So no complaints here. I'm ready to jump into the new year. And this is a special year, Michael, is it not?
That is correct. This year marks the 50th anniversary of Walt Disney World, a benchmark I can hardly believe that we have reached. We talked in our recent episodes about how we were there for the 15th anniversary. And at the time, it seemed Walt Disney World was old, but that was only 15 years, which blows my mind to think about it now. But when you're a little kid, I guess that seems like a long time. When we were young, the park anniversaries were big deals. Like the 15th, 20th, and 25th all had these huge parties. It was a big old deal. But after that, it seems like the big celebrations went out of style because, subsequent anniversaries have barely been noted. That seems strange to me.
Yeah, I wonder why that is. It seems like it was a big deal. I mean, the 25th seemed very successful, but it was the last one they really had.
Yeah, I don't know why those kind of fell out of favor. But regardless of what's going on in the real world out there, we've decided to mark this milestone by having an entire year-long celebration of Walt Disney World here on the podcast. Each month, we'll talk about a different area of the Magic Kingdom or the surrounding resort. And in January, we're kicking things off with Liberty Square. Now, usually a visit to the Magic Kingdom would begin by talking about Main Street USA or even a trip across the Seven Seas Lagoon. But we're starting with Liberty Square because of its subject matter and how it happens to overlap with a very notable real-world event happening this month, the inauguration of a new president of the United States. So because of this synergy, we're going to discuss a number of stories that relate thematically to the presidency, and wrap it all up with a visit to Liberty Square, the Magic Kingdom's own original and unique land. Jeff, I'm really excited for this series of stories.
Me too. I mean, you think about all these unique places at Walt Disney World. It's just a great excuse to talk about them, but they all relate to interesting threads of Disney history. And this land, of course, is, like you said, it's unique. It's the first unique land outside of Disneyland, so deserves special emphasis.
Absolutely. And as you'll see from the stories that we're going to talk about during the show, like for the whole year, it's not going to be all Walt Disney World all the time, but we're looking for stories that tie into the themes of the land. So we're going to hear a lot about Walt and the United States presidency, the relationship there, and some other fun things before we move on. Because, Disney has deep ties with the presidency. From an early age, Walt was an admirer of Abraham Lincoln. He famously dressed up like Lincoln for a school project, where he memorized and recited the Gettysburg Address. His performance went over so well that he went on a tour of the classes at his school repeating his recitation. So he kind of was a big hit on that scene. But, let's send it over to Walt himself for more.
Ever since I was a small boy in Illinois, I've had a great personal admiration for Abraham Lincoln. So when we decided to recreate some of the great moments in Mr. Lincoln's life for the World's Fair, we directed all our energies to that task. We wanted to bring to the people of today the inspiring words of the man who held this nation together during its moment of greatest crisis, the Civil War. Now, to recreate a truly lifelike image of Lincoln, we use our new medium of audio animatronics. To start with, we were fortunate in being able to secure this life mask of the 16th president. How do we get this, Blaine?
This is actually a copy of an original life mask by the sculptor Leonard Volk in Chicago in 1860.
Before Lincoln was president.
Before Lincoln was president.
Before he had a beard.
That's right.
Now with this to start with, our sculptor, Blaine Gibson, has been able to create this very accurate likeness of this great man. During our exhaustive research into Lincoln's life, we studied his mannerisms, his gestures, and even his voice characteristics to create a faithful likeness of this honored man. The final result is so lifelike that you might find it hard to believe. So when you visit the fair, be sure and stop by the State of Illinois Pavilion and spend a few moments with this great man.
As we've seen, Walt Disney spent a lot of time and money attempting to bring the 16th president to life for guests to encounter. And later we'll discuss how his Imagineers eventually achieved his goal of bringing all the presidents to life in the Hall of Presidents. But during his life, Walt's presidential encounters were not all of the animatronic variety. Due to his prominence in popular culture, Walt had many run-ins with real-life chief executives. Now, back when I was out in California doing some freelance work for D23 and the Disney Archives, the archives put on a big exhibit at the Reagan Library in Simi Valley. And as part of that, I did a lot of research into Walt's past presidential encounters. And the archives has a number of fascinating bits of correspondence between former presidents and the Disney studios. We'll mention Jimmy Carter later in the show. One of my favorite artifacts was a fan letter that his daughter Amy had written to the studio with a crayon drawing of Evinrude from The Rescuers.
Oh, naturally. I mean,
Of course, I love that. That's what she latched onto. I love Evinrude, and a drawing of Evinrude. It was great.
that exhibit at the Reagan Library has a great soundtrack that's on Spotify. It has a bunch of great stuff. It's just
Is it really?
Great little compilation from the Reagan Library Disney exhibit.
Yeah, it was a huge exhibit, and it was a big deal. I went to the opening of it, and Nancy Reagan was there, in her it had to be her last years. All the Bob Gurr was there, and all the characters were there, all the usual suspects. But it was kind of a big deal, and it was a big old exhibit, so pretty wild. Disney had heard from the White House as early as the Roosevelt administration, though. In 1934, not yet a year into FDR's first term, Eleanor Roosevelt sent Walt a letter recommending that the story Struble Peter be considered for an animated short. She said in her letter that FDR was a big fan of Mickey Mouse and that they had spent many evenings watching Mickey cartoons, which I find interesting. Walt eventually did consider Struble Peter for adaptation, not only as a silly symphony, but as the possible basis for a segment of Fantasia.
Would that mean that Eleanor Roosevelt was the co-producer of that if it came to light?
Oh, it should have been. Yeah, she'd have to be listed as a co-producer. I'll also mention that Struble Peter gets mentioned by Dwight Schrute in an episode of The Office.
Yes, it does.
So Walt had a number of correspondences with the Roosevelts during their time in the White House, and Eleanor even toured the Disney Animation Studio in 1941 to witness the studio's contributions to the war effort. There's a funny story from this. We're both fans of the Baby Weems segment of The Reluctant Dragon. And if you remember in the Baby Weems story, there's a segment where Roosevelt appears, doing a fireside chat or something. I don't even remember what. But they have a little Roosevelt impersonator. Well, apparently she saw the storyboards for this when she was touring the studio and got kind of offended by it just a little bit and wanted him to take it out. And so Walt sent her this letter apologizing for the Weems incident, as he called it. And, saying that they'd, take care of it. But I don't know what happened to that because it wound up being in the movie. He sent her a cell set up from Nutcracker Suite from Fantasia as a little sweetener. And so that must have worked the trick because it stayed in the picture. I don't know if anything ever happened to that. Interesting. That's just a random little aside about the Weems incident. So Walt had lots of, dealings with presidents, but it wasn't until Disneyland opened in 1955 that Walt truly began playing host to the presidents. At Disneyland, we're not Republican or Democrat, Walt later said. We're representing our country. I've had Truman, Kennedy, Eisenhower at Disneyland. It's for all the people. So, as indicated, had people from both sides of the aisle there. The first ex-president to visit the park was Harry S. Truman in 1957, not long after the park opened. He was convinced by his wife, Bess, to make a stop at Disneyland while on a political trip to California. And initially reluctant, he really got into the act. He led a pack of political allies and curious onlookers through almost all of the park's attractions. As Truman approached the gates of Disneyland, he was presented a Disneyland flag featuring a picture of Mickey Mouse, and he was welcomed by the Disneyland band's rendition of I'm Just Wild About Harry. I wish I could have been there for this. In less than 2 hours, the president made a barnstorming tour of the entire park, all while entertaining his media entourage with an endless stream of quips. When asked if Monstro the Whale and the Storybook Land canal boats reminded him of any of his Republican foes, he replied, "Oh no, whales have got some brains."
Zing.
Zing! Aboard the Mark Twain steamship, the Trumans were again serenaded by the Disneyland band with performances of Happy Days Are Here Again, Missouri Waltz, and Waiting for the Robert E. Lee, which is weird. But Mrs. Truman balked at some of the park's more thrilling offerings, refusing to join the president aboard the Skyway. He wound up leaving her earthbound, and he rode it with Disneyland executive Jack Sayers. So he made the trip on the Skyway. There is only one attraction that President Truman refused to ride, and he was, of course, a staunch Democrat. He famously took a pass when reporters asked him to pose with Dumbo the flying elephant. And he said, "Make it a donkey, and I'll do it." And this strikes me as a scene from an old movie with a bunch of sassy reporters, like setting off flashbulbs and cracking wise.
Yes. It's like Peck's Bad Boy or the...
Yes.
I mean, I wonder if he made it into the hat shop. You'd think he'd love that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I've seen the pictures of him riding the horse-drawn trolley, loving that. It's like built for a place like Harry Truman, Disneyland is.
Totally. And when you consider he had kind of a background not too dissimilar from Walt's, really.
Exactly.
So it would have felt like old home for him, probably, coming down Main Street. So, yeah, quite a scene. He made quite a stir. Another president with whom Walt became particularly close was Dwight D. Eisenhower. During his 1952 campaign, Eisenhower was the first major presidential candidate to advertise heavily on television. One of his prominent boosters had contacted Roy Disney about putting together an ad for the candidate, and so some Disney studio personnel worked off the clock to create an animated spot for the campaign called "We'll Take Ike to Washington," better known as "We Like Ike." Presented that October, 2 versions of the ad were created. One was 20 seconds long, and the other was about a minute in length. Eisenhower was so grateful that Walt and his wife Lillian were actually offered tickets to the inaugural festivities and subsequent ball after Eisenhower was elected. Jeff, this is quite an ad.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this was iconic when we were growing up, still. I mean,
yeah, it's
it was
like one
still
of those,
known.
Probably one of the two, like I think of like Johnson's Daisy ad.
Yeah.
As kind of the polar opposite of this, and this as being like the iconic presidential ads you always heard about when you were a kid.
Right. So
I always crack up at like the Disney style animated face of Ike bouncing along on the elephant.
Yes.
He looks a little like Jiminy Cricket. He has a big Jiminy Cricket aspect
He kind
to
of
him.
is a lot like Jiminy Cricket in a way. I mean, kind of does look like Jiminy Cricket in real life.
They could have had Ukulele Ike play him on the show or something.
Now we're talking. Yeah. Man.
So, this commercial is probably best remembered for its catchy jingle repeating the phrase, "Ike for President, Ike for President." Reports at the time credited the lyrics to Gil George, a quote-unquote Democrat for Eisenhower. This was actually a pseudonym for Disney studio nurse Hazel Gilman George, who was Walt's longtime physical therapist and confidant.
Wow.
Yeah, right? She was the woman who gave Walt his evening massage to help his old polo injury as he had his scotch mist and vented about his day. She's someone, that's a room that, man, I wish there had been recordings of.
No. That is a good relationship right there.
Exactly. She heard it all. Gil George, quote unquote, contributed a number of memorable lyrics to Disney television and film projects over the years, writing alongside studio composer Paul Smith. Her credits included dozens of songs for the Mickey Mouse Club, including Talent Roundup and Beauty Is as Beauty Does, as well as familiar tunes such as From All of Us to All of You, which we mentioned in our Christmas episode,
Right.
and the theme for Old Yeller. That is an amazing resume.
Wow, I am shocked. I had no idea. And I mean, Paul Smith is a juggernaut. He is serious business. So, I mean, what a cool thing. What a cool little story there.
Yeah, just the studio nurse cranking out these like iconic ditties. It's pretty wild.
Well, and all, obviously the songs you mentioned, the Talent Roundup, Beauty Is and Busy Beauty Does, From All of Us to All of You, Old Yeller. I mean, you could take out Old Yeller, but the rest of those Mickey Mouse Clubs they're really dense lyrically.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff discussed there. So that's impressive.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Just
Somebody who's
you never
not
know.
a songwriter by trade.
Right. The masseuse and songwriter. The list of Disney talent that worked on the Eisenhower commercial is a remarkable cross-section of the studio's most talented artists. Supervised by producer Bill Anderson and directed by Disney vet Ham Lusk and assistant director Clyde Jones, they brought Gil George's lyrics to life with Paul Smith's music. The soundtrack itself was performed by Judd Conlon and his Rhythmaires. Conlon served as a musical arranger for the studio, and his group was a frequent presence on Disney soundtracks, including those for Cinderella, Peter Pan, and Alice in Wonderland.
Wow.
So that's a real studio sound for you.
Indeed.
Going in there. Performing animation duties on the ad were three of Walt's famous 9 old men, Eric Larson, John Lounsbury, and Wolfgang Reitherman. They were joined by George Rowley and assistant animators Frank Kopietz and Art Stevens. Storymen Hal Adelquist, Milton Banta, William Berg, and Winston Hibbler worked on the short, as did layout artists Ken Anderson, McLaren Stewart, Ken O'Connor, Lance Noley, Charles Filippi, and Bruce Bushman. That is a lot of talent. Winston Hibbler also did a little narration at the end of the short.
Wow. I mean, it's just funny that all those storymen worked on it.
I know,
what's the
but there's
story?
not really any story to it. Backgrounds were contributed by Claude Coates and James Trout, and artist and future Imagineer Rolly Crump served as an in-betweener, of all things. Jimmy McDonald, sound effects legend and voice of Mickey Mouse, also participated, all for a TV ad.
Yeah. I mean, it's an important TV ad, and clearly the quality of it lived past for decades. I mean, it captured a moment in the, culture very well, and it spoke to that moment. So it's impressive.
Absolutely. The result of their efforts was very well received by the Eisenhower campaign. It got frequent airplay that October. In a letter to Eisenhower booster Jacqueline Cochran from Bill Anderson after the election, Anderson pointed out, quote, "We have been advised by these stations that these cartoon spots were played more than any of the other Eisenhower television films," unquote. Anderson sent Cochran, Eisenhower, and several other members of the campaign staff autographed animation cell setups from the short. So that's a nice little thing in somebody's collection somewhere. Several years later, in 1957, Walt was selected to receive the Milestone Award from the Screen Producers Guild. Writing from the White House with congratulations, Eisenhower was effusive with praise, saying, in part, quote, "Your genius as a creator of folklore has long been recognized by leaders in every field of human endeavor, including the most discerning body of critics, the children of this land and all lands. Now I am glad to express what I have long felt, a deep appreciation for your skill and the ways you have applied it in many worthy causes," unquote. Walt was obviously pleased with such high praise, as you might imagine. In his reply to the president, he expressed, "It is my earnest desire that we will always be able to do the things that will merit your esteem." Which is fancy. The next year, he did just that when the Mickey Mouse Club aired a documentary segment, Inside Report on Washington. The film was delivered to the White House, and Eisenhower reported to Walt, "I thought you would like to know that my older grandchildren, as well as the other members of the Eisenhower family, thoroughly enjoyed the film. After leaving the White House, Eisenhower finally visited Disneyland with his family, remarking, "We've heard about Disneyland for years, almost dropped in a time or two. Something always came up." His wife, Mamie, told reporters, "This is Grandpa's gift to the children." Drawing a crowd of reporters and park guests alike, the former president posed in a fire chief's helmet on the Main Street USA fire truck and took in the sights from the Disneyland and Santa Fe Railroad, the monorail, submarine voyage, and more. In their 6-hour visit, the president got in on the act, taking the wheel of the Yangtze Lotus on the Jungle Cruise. He later admitted to the assembled media, "I suppose you might say that I'm enjoying this as much as the children. No, more." Halfway through their visit, the Eisenhowers begged off for a breather. "You kids enjoy the wilder rides," the president said. "Grandma and I are going to rest." After a 45-minute break in Walt's apartment above the firehouse, pretty snazzy, they took an electric car to meet the family in Frontierland, where they rode through the painted desert on the mine train through nature's wonderland. While taking in the Golden Horseshoe Review, one of Eisenhower's 4 grandchildren was called on stage to learn a balloon trick from Wally Bogue. "Now, why don't you go back and show this trick to your grandfather?" Bogue said. "It'll make him a big man in the neighborhood," which cracked Ike up. Before leaving the park, Ike raved, "I never dreamed it was this entertaining. We enjoyed every minute of it and hope to be back soon." In subsequent years, the two men continued to correspond. In March 1966, Walt wrote what could nearly be described as a fan letter to the president. He even requested an autograph. Walt said that with Ike's autograph, he may be able to better impress my grandchildren one of these days. I think this is kind of a charming glimpse at a guy who had, risen from the bottom up to befriend these big world leaders. It's so weird to think of Walt asking for somebody's autograph.
I also wonder, did anybody receive more proclamations or like formal certificate proclamation things than Walt Disney?
It makes me think of, that opening room there at the Family Museum in San Francisco,
Right.
which is just like wall to wall.
It's like illuminated manuscripts of praise. It's so bizarre.
Yeah, well, I mean, he got more Oscars than anybody else in history, so
That's right.
everything else pile up too, I guess.
But it's clear that his admiration was, for Eisenhower was very, very strong.
Yes, absolutely. It's just so funny to hear him being like, could you please sign this, please, for me? It's pretty great. The photo that Walt wanted autographed came from a luncheon held in Palm Springs in 1963, where Walt was, of course, given the George Washington Award by the Freedom's Foundation at Valley Forge.
Hey, that sounds important.
It does. Yeah, that's
a lot
several
of
important
layers.
things all in one. Walt was the 5th individual to be so honored, cited for sustaining the ideals and principles upon which America has been founded, whatever those are, and his work in passing those values on to children. In presenting the award personally to Walt, Eisenhower acclaimed Walt for his educational wisdom and patriotic dedication in advancing the concept of freedom under God, for his unfailing professional devotion to the things which matter most, human dignity and personal responsibility, for masterful creative leadership in communicating the hopes and aspirations of our free society to the far corners of the planet. So it's something to get your little award in person from Eisenhower.
Yeah, man, that is serious. And the George Washington Award.
The George Washington Award, exactly. By 1966, General Eisenhower was raising money for Eisenhower College. To aid in fundraising and to honor Dwight and Mamie Eisenhower's 50th wedding anniversary, Walt filmed a promotional spot that June on a soundstage where work was underway for The Happiest Millionaire. Ever savvy, Walt managed to plug his upcoming film by filming on the Biddle Mansion set and pointing out that the movie was set in the same year, 1916, that Ike and Mamie had been wed. He wrapped up the pitch by adding, "Now a lot of the General's good friends feel that this is the perfect opportunity for the citizens he has served so faithfully to express their deep affection and regards." Since Eisenhower College was the project closest to the General's heart, Walt said, "Viewers can offer no better congratulations than sending a donation." So Walt put in the pitch there. The next month, Eisenhower returned salutations, sending a telegram to Walt wishing a full measure of health and happiness on Walt and Lillian's 41st anniversary. So, an anniversary telegram from the president. Just a few months later, Walt would be gone, but his company's presidential legacy was just beginning.
The Hall of Presidents debuted as one of the new attractions with the opening of Walt Disney World on October 1st, 1971, and it is one of the few unique attractions to Florida that doesn't exist in Disneyland, or any other castle park for that matter. But its roots are firmly in Disneyland. You know, when I was growing up and learning about Disney history and all the differences in the parks, I just assumed that Disney started with Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln and moved into the idea for Hall of Presidents a few years later as a plussing of that idea. But the idea of Hall of Presidents, as we discussed a bit in our episode 4, predates the Mr. Lincoln attraction.
Yeah, this was something I never realized either, that Mr. Lincoln was kind of a compromise, that originally they'd wanted to do something very similar to Hall of Presidents, and it kind of shrunk and then expanded back up. So It's an interesting path.
So on our episode 4, which you should go back and listen to if you haven't heard it, we traveled back to the late 1950s pitch for Liberty Street, the unbuilt offshoot of Main Street in California, that would eventually be repackaged as Liberty Square in Florida. The Hall of the Presidents of the United States was an early germ of an idea that would be developed for over more than a decade, but most of the work would be done to the lead up to a concept that was pitched in 1961 called One Nation Under God, a spectacular that would use the latest technological advances Disney had developed, and in some cases hoped to develop. One Nation Under God would further the initial concept by employing Circarama technology, which we know now as Circle Vision. Circarama took a big leap with the debut of America the Beautiful, which debuted at the American Pavilion at the 1958 Brussels World's Fair. In the afterglow of its successful run, it was a natural tool to put into a show highlighting American history, and so the Imagineers set about designing a show around this concept. In the 1961 version, there is a model that has the Circarama screen up at the top of the theater with a separate stage below with the presidents. It's pretty interesting that they had them separated at that point, given the screen was supposed to be 200 degrees and not a full 360.
Yeah, it's weird. It's interesting to see how they took these technologies that were kind of cutting edge at the time and really where their interest and mind was at, and tried to start folding them together. Things that we think of as like second nature, but at the time, there hadn't been an attraction like that. So it's,
right.
What's it going to be like?
Multimedia.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, I just imagine it'd be strange to go into a room where there's like a stage with a curtain and then all of a sudden a movie starts above your head.
Yeah, it's like Timekeeper kind of.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So One Nation Under God was meant to be a telling of American history, still attached in its structure to the Constitution. And that goes back to the very beginning at Liberty Street, which had its Hall of the Declaration of Independence and the Hall of the Presidents of the United States. And that focused on the Constitution and highlighted Washington, Adams, Jefferson, and Madison, and some of their early speeches. Disney legend Wathel Rogers, who would work on the audio animatronics of the attraction eventually, described it as, quote, a Circarama presentation of great moments in constitutional crises. Now, that makes me wonder, why didn't they just call it Great Moments in Constitutional Crises?
But it would certainly be receiving several redos of late.
Right. That's right.
They'd balk at the price of the expansion it would require.
Oh, so James Algar, the frequent director of True Life Adventures and Disney Legend, he was tapped to write the script. And the studios set about pitching the idea to potential sponsors, during which they made a pitch reel we have been lucky enough to come across. Here is a pitch for One Nation Under God from 1961.
Introducing Walt Disney's newest and most exciting entertainment venture, One Nation Under God, featuring the Hall of American Presidents. To fully appreciate the ambitious and imaginative plans for this new Walt Disney production, it's helpful to understand the specially designed theater in which it will be produced. And so, before we present the story, may we take a moment to tell you about that theater. This cross-section sketch visualizes it. As you can see, it's designed in a circle. Please keep in mind, if you will, this idea of the circle. It's the key to the entire exciting theatrical experience. Inside this magic circle, there'll be presented a show combining all of our 30 years experience in filmmaking, in animation effects, in sound and lighting techniques, and finally, in pleasing audiences at Disneyland, USA for the past 6 years. In that time, we have entertained 26 million guests. If there's one thing we've learned about what people like, it's that they enjoy being more than a mere spectator. People like to participate. One of the most successful attractions at Disneyland is the Circorama film, which completely surrounds its audience with a projected motion picture scene. Originally made for the Brussels Fair and later shown in Moscow, this unique film has caused favorable comment wherever it's been seen. It's this concept, enlarged to new depths of dramatic meaning, that will be incorporated in One Nation Under God. Using the same principle of multiple projectors, thrilling film panoramas will extend more than halfway around the theater. A new concept of stereophonic sound will enhance this sense of dimension. Indeed, what the audience sees and hears will seem to be happening in a most realistic fashion on all sides. People will truly participate in this vivid personal adventure. But One Nation Under God is much more than a motion picture. It will combine all the techniques of show business, those of the theater and the stage included. For instance, it will recreate the vast reaches of outer space on the domed ceiling overhead. And for its climactic finale, it will present the majestic and inspiring Hall of Presidents. On a large three-dimensional stage, there will appear all of the American presidents, life-size and lifelike. And just when it seems that these figures are not actually real, they will come to life. Yes, literally come to life and move and talk. Through the secret magic of Disney artists and artisans, Abraham Lincoln will speak to the mind and the heart of America. In his own words, there will come to us a prophecy as meaningful in our time as in his. How will this be done? Through the miracle of audio animatronics. In brief, this is the combining of the techniques of animation, of sound, and electronics to articulate the human figure and the human voice in ways never before known or seen. Lincoln's stirring and prophetic words will refresh and renew our faith in our heritage. In fact, all of the dialogue in the production will be historically authentic, the actual speeches of the persons portrayed. One Nation Under God is something unique, a true Walt Disney special, for it's the combining into one spectacular performance all the magic of Walt Disney's 40 years in show business. The plans for this performance are ambitious, but the show itself will not be complicated to present. It will go on automatically, 2 shows every hour at the touch of a button, everything electronic. Every curtain cue, every lighting effect, every bit of action and music will be controlled by automatic equipment. Here is the story, One Nation Under God. As you watch the presentation that follows, Please realize that within the limited technique of color slides, we cannot begin to create the theater in the round that is eventually intended. That's why we remind you again of the circle. Please imagine yourself seated in the center of that circle, part of an audience of 1,200 people, an excited and emotionally involved participant in the moving experience unfolding around you.
So a circle, Michael, keep that in your mind.
I'm envisioning a circle. I wonder if this was the inspiration for Donald in Mathmagic Land, envisioning a circle,
Could be.
or vice versa.
Yeah, they were really, I got the circle, but
A circle in a circle, a wheel within a wheel.
But in the middle of this spiel, we have a scripted performance of One Nation Under God, complete with acting and a score. It's pretty impressively realized here. And, instead of playing it all, I thought it'd be interesting to go through this in brief and talk about the similarities and differences with the Hall of Presidents that came along a decade later. More often than not, they are extremely similar, even down to some of the exact same script. And you have some of the same voice talent as well that would be involved. Most notably, the great Mr. Paul Frees. And he does some great performances on this pitch reel.
Yeah, it's the thing that's most striking to me about this is this was, I say this was so far before Hall of Presidents, but it was just 10 years before Hall of Presidents.
Right. But at this time, that's a long time. I mean, they would develop stuff and get it done. Yeah.
Yeah, in Disney years, that is a long time. You're right. The fact that so much of it, even down to specific lines, you're like, oh, well, they kept that. So they obviously liked it and just kind of stuck it in a drawer and then dusted it off for Walt Disney World.
Right. And of course, the planning of Walt Disney World was a lot in the wake of Walt's death, when they're kind of pulling plans out of mothballs in some ways, so it makes sense that this would be, and this seemed like a real priority for them. And we'll go through kind of the reasons why it didn't get built. But I mean, this seemed like a big deal, that they really wanted to make this show. They just couldn't at the time. So.
Oh yeah. I mean, when you consider its roots were, right after Disneyland opened, they wanted to do this. And they just didn't have it usually came down to a combination of time, money, or technology, or all three.
Right.
And the stars never aligned until Disney World. But it's something they clearly really, really wanted to do, like you say.
All right, so we start the One Nation Under God with the reading of the Constitution by a crowd, just like Hall of Presidents, which is always kind of so intense.
It is.
Yeah.
Ominous beginning.
And the intensity really ratchets up in this particular spiel, because there's a real dramatic monologue talking about the testing of the Constitution through the years. And that is still in the Hall of Presidents, but not to the... they really go with this testing. There is a testing of the Constitution. So we're off to Philadelphia for the Constitutional Convention, and they give a little bit more of profiles of some of the founders. You get Ben Franklin, Hamilton, Madison. They get brief profiles. They mention Ben Franklin's gout, which I found interesting.
It's the kind of education you don't get from Disney attractions anymore. Who had gout? Who of the founding fathers had gout?
So, at the Hall of Presidents, they kind of skip over all of this exposition and go straight to George Washington, who is played by Paul Frees. The Constitution gets signed. There's a celebration surrounding the signing, and then we're off to the first test, the Whiskey Rebellion, where corn is being taxed, or spirits are being taxed across state lines, and this stays in the Hall of Presidents. But the second and third tests of this spiel, the second being the Tripoli and the First Barbary War, and Monroe and his Monroe Doctrine in light of the threat of Russian interference in Latin America, those are skipped over in 1971. So they were going deep here.
Yeah, this reminds me a lot of, someday we're going to talk about a very early script to American Adventure that I have. That includes much of what we know as the American Adventure, but also, if filmed or if staged at its full length, would have probably been like an hour and a half long, because it's like literally every moment of American history brought to life in an extended scene. So this plays a little bit like that. You've got the Hall of Presidents, but you've also got, well, let's talk about the first Barbary War.
Right.
So there's a lot in there.
It's just amazing. I mean, it's like anything that I kind of was like, when I listened to this and then I rewatched the Hall of Presidents from 1971, it's like they took it out. Anything that's kind of going on too long. There's a couple of monologues from the narrator that go on too long in this, and they're just kind of weeded out. So they did a good job with that. So next we go to the threat of secession. This is in 1832. There's a great voiceover in the spiel reading in a quote-unquote Southern accent. And this, of course, has Andrew Jackson's rebuff to the protest over tariff laws with the line, "I will hang the first man of them I can get my hands on to the first tree I can find." And that, of course, is recorded by the great Dal McKinnon in the Hall of Presidents as Andrew
Absolutely.
Jackson.
Yes.
A legend. Move on to slavery and sectionalism and the Lincoln-Douglas debates, just like Hall of Presidents, and they're already using Royal Dano in this pitch reel.
And Royal meant to be Lincoln.
I
right
know.
From the start.
So, one of our favorite parts of the original Hall of Presidents, if I may, Michael, is the heckling of Abraham Lincoln. Is that safe to say?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to play a little of this heckling just because I want to. So here is, because the heckling is really intense in the first version. I want to play some of it for you.
I say this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free. A house divided against itself cannot stand.
That's what you think, you long drink of water.
Yes, my friend. That's what I think.
It's like a Pirate of the Caribbean.
That's pretty hardcore.
That's what you think.
It's so loud. Good stuff, man. I just wish I could have opportunities to be like a recorded heckler. They're doing great work. Oh, and then just like Hall of Presidents, we moved to Lincoln in the White House, murmuring, "I see the storm coming. I know his hand is in it." And this is a super dramatic, even more dramatic than what ended up in Hall of Presidents. It's Royal Dano's whispering into the microphone. I love this portrait in the Hall of Presidents, the piece of art there.
Oh, yes. That's a great one.
Now we're in Fort Sumter for the outset of the Civil War. They come the reckoning, the supreme test, the ultimate test of the Constitution. And there is a long period here with sound effects and no dialogue. We'll come back around to this and why this is important. But finally, the Union is preserved, leading to a busy, productive century. Shades of an American adventure here. And you have really wacky hammering music in this pitch reel. In the 1971 version, it's a lot more of a ragtime piece, but it's kind of like hi-ho here a little bit. And so at the end, you see a bigger difference. It's the industrial age, the age of invention. You have travel by man to space. And then it says, quote, "The world stands on the threshold of a new era, the age of space." It calls up the prophets and the wise men who look to the stars. And then there's this really intense monologue that keeps going. So this is where essentially they just have the Saturn V at the end of Hall of Presidents. They just keep going here. This is, "But tomorrow never comes. And today and yesterday the answers come not in mechanized marvels, but in human hearts and hopes, and freedom under God. Self-government must be perpetuated, and the Constitution is the rock. The future leaders of the country must be committed as the leaders of yesterday." And at last we are introduced to the presidents in this great Hall of Presidents, much like the Hall of Presidents. So, and then Abraham Lincoln gives a speech. They sing Glory Hallelujah, and they show the Capitol Dome behind them. And that is One Nation Under God. And I tell you, the drama is high at the end of the Circarama part with the space. I can tell you.
Yes, totally. That is like barn burner stem winder of a speech right there.
Yeah, it is very intense. But it does seem like the Civil War portion of the show was meant to be the real showstopper. aside from the presidents, of course. In a Walt Disney script pitching the attraction, he describes what the scene would be like. Here's what he said. When we reenacted a battle from the Civil War, you'll think you're one of the participants. Right here in the middle of things. You'll be ducking the bullets, or thinking you ought to. The action will be so close. Your theater seat will shake with the explosions, and you'll actually smell the powder. When the cannon fires over here, you'll hear the shells zooming overhead and landing over here. That part of the show came from our experience with dimensional sound in Fantasia. Nowadays, it's called stereophonic sound. He goes on to say that One Nation Under God will combine all of my experience in filmmaking, and television storytelling, and animation effects, and sound and lighting techniques, and finally, in pleasing audiences at Disneyland USA. If there's one thing I've learned about what people will like, it's that they enjoy being more than just a spectator or a bystander. People like to participate. They like to be actors on stage. And so we've learned to create adventures that will let them be part of the show. In One Nation Under God, that's exactly what we hope to do with this theater in the round. So again, has emphasized the circle, Michael, so much so that he also says, in the circular theater, there are no pillars to spoil the view, no balconies to get in the way. In fact, at one point in the production, you'll be sitting in a spaceport watching spaceships and rockets whiz by overhead. That would have been something to witness.
Yeah, it really would have been. It sounds pretty nuts. And it's kind of like, I'm trying to even think of what it feels almost like Universe of Energy or something, where you're kind of directed to like one thing, and then like the show gets bigger. It's like suddenly like the whole roof comes off this place, and you're surrounded in this action. And I guess like a lot of the inspiration for this may have come from like cycloramas. Because, there were a lot of those like down south where you would have like a Civil War, like a giant painting, and it would travel around and it would have light and sound effects and kind of tell the story of a big battle. So I have a feeling like that was probably the impetus for a lot of this. But this, of course, being Walt, was on another scale. I love how he shouts out Fantasia. Like he was really devoted to directional sound.
Right. It's like one part Universe of Energy, one part Cyclorama in Atlanta, one part Captain EO with the seats.
Yes. Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
Another point of emphasis they make in all of this is how the show is 100% automatic. And that, of course, ties into the audio animatronic technology that was being developed at the time, also the film technology. This show would have been very high-tech to the point that it seems like technology was one of the main factors in its slow development. It's kind of funny how big of a deal they make out of this now, where we have all these shows that are a result of this tech. But man, if you think about it, that would have been really revolutionary to think about at the time.
Oh, yeah. And, it was such a big deal when Walt Disney World came around with DAX and then Epcot with Epcot Computer Central, that it was everything, that was a focus of a lot of the early Epcot hype. One computer runs the whole show and
right.
would open and close theater doors and turn the lights up and down and all of this. And there was a time when that was not a given thing, and it was really cutting edge.
Right. It seems like there was a desire to have something akin to a waxworks, but more lifelike, and that led to the evolution of this idea of what we know today. Again, from Wathel Rogers, after the Circarama showing, a curtain will close, then open again to reveal the Hall of Presidents. The visitor will see all the chief executives modeled life-size. He'll think it's a waxworks until Lincoln stands up and begins to talk. So it seems like a big wow moment where people don't quite know what they're in for.
Well, when you think of a world where people didn't know audio animatronics and it wasn't an assumed thing, so it'd be like, yeah, you would go and see the wax statues of the president at the cyclorama, and it would be exciting. But then they start to move and talk. It would be crazy.
Right. Around this time of this development, Disney signed on to work on attractions for the 1964 New York World's Fair. And One Nation Under God was pitched, along with several other attractions, to be in the fair, was turned down because of the price tag involved. The head of the fair, Robert Moses, came out to tour the studio and famously met Abraham Lincoln. Walt presented him with the Lincoln animatronic that was being developed as a prototype for One Nation Under God, and Lincoln stood up and shook Moses' hand. It seemed like this kind of made him lose his mind with amazement. He insisted on getting the show to the fair, but as much as we know, the Lincoln animatronic proved problematic enough on its own. It barely made it to New York just by himself, so the idea of getting more than one animatronic ready wasn't really feasible. So we got Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, which is a great show in its own right. Definitely more of a narrow focus. Michael, of course, there are a lot of tales of the development and implementation of the Lincoln animatronic, some of which are very comical.
Yeah, when you hear the stories from the guys who worked on this, people like Bob Gurr, I mean, this was a technology that was not well understood and had not been done before at this level. And, a lot of powerful machinery involved. So there were lots of like chairs being crushed and tables being flipped and like hydraulic fluid exploding everywhere.
Their original hydraulic fluid was red, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly. So, when there was a malfunction along those lines, people would think, well, this was very poor taste to have this in your Lincoln presentation. And, every electric surges would set it off, weather would set it off, the train passing at Disneyland would set it off. So, yeah, it was a real experimental piece. And you can see why they didn't want to do it with, 30 whatever figures as it would have been at the time.
I think it's incredible they ended up pulling it off in New York because, I mean, the quantum leap involved is pretty stunning. And they kind of scrapped it halfway through and started from scratch to make it lighter. So, interesting story. Quite the achievement. Blaine Gibson was the sculptor for the Lincoln animatronic, and he was originally an animator for Disney who started in 1939, but Walt happened to see an exhibition of some sculptures Gibson did outside the studio and tapped him to work at WED. Gibson would retire in 1983, but not after sculpting all the presidents for the 1971 attraction, and afterwards every president ending with George W. Bush. He also worked on all the other great attractions of the era, the Enchanted Tiki Room, Pirates of the Caribbean, the Haunted Mansion. So a lot of work we know and love. Gotta love Blaine Gibson.
Yeah, and he's one of those guys who retired but never really retired,
Right.
Because he would always be out doing stuff.
Of course, Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln would make a home in Disneyland, and later when Walt Disney World was being laid out, plans included Liberty Square in lieu of New Orleans Square. The Hall of the Presidents at its centerpiece. It was a different time of travel patterns. They couldn't put it so close to New Orleans Square. Couldn't have pirates in Florida, Michael.
Yeah. I mean, there are already pirates in Florida, so
Right.
you don't want to take snow to the North Pole. People have already got it there, so yeah, that was the thinking. It's so strange to think now that they'd be like, no, we have to do this completely different thing because people will be burned out on pirates in Florida.
But again, they had the plans and the dusted off some old plans and kind of repurposed them. But as we said and gone through a bit earlier, the 1961 concept and the 1971 show are remarkably similar, even down to a lot of the script. But the production of the show was quite impressive. We don't see this Disney as much anymore, but when Disney worked with factual elements, they really dialed into getting the details just right. We see a lot of this in some Magic Kingdom design. Of course, Epcot has a ton. Even something like the Great Movie Ride in the 80s. I mean, you can even say Animal Kingdom in the way they deal with specific cultures. But when they do that, it's some Imagineering that I love.
Yeah, you hear a lot about the Disney difference, and that phrase gets applied to different things over the years. When I was a kid, it applied to the level of insane research that went into things like this. You would always hear, they had done the research on the most obscure, tiny little bit of business that the guest might never even see.
Right.
And of course, that carried through all the Epcot stuff, as you mentioned. And it really was a big hallmark of the time. And I mean, people were doing deep dives of research, bringing in expert academics on the subject and everything.
Going way above and beyond the necessary level of detail. It's wild.
Yeah, not just a Google search. They were going deep in.
The film would be directed by John DeCure, a legendary figure who won 3 Academy Awards and art-directed amazing spectacles such as Cleopatra, The King and I, and Hello, Dolly. DeCure would also work with Imagineering on a lot of projects. Also on the team was Disney legend Ub Iwerks, who would design the film system for this attraction with 5 screens shooting 70 millimeter film. It would be his last work at Disney before his death.
Yeah, that's amazing.
There's some great paintings that would be made for this film, over 80 pieces, some of which were 40 feet long. Some of that artwork would make its way around the park in all different areas. In the lobby of the attraction, there's, most notably for me, there's a golden spike portrait that was located in City Hall where I used to work. That was from the original Hall of Presidents. Some beautiful work, and all kinds of Disney artists contributed to that. I mean, we've seen a video where Herb Ryman's doing some, and all kinds of artists.
Yes.
And the Saturn V launching Apollo 13 would be filmed for the finale of the film. No space stations like One Nation Under God, but it's incredible to think that in the 10 years since the original pitch, America entered human space flight with Alan Shepard, and then they landed on the moon before the decade was out. So,
yeah, it's really wild. And it's also pretty amazing that the film that was in there for so long was Apollo 13.
I know. For the audio animatronic figures, such extensive research was done, it boggles the mind. The furniture on stage were exact replicas, particularly Washington's chair from the Constitutional Convention. Tiny details of wardrobes, pins, even FDR's leg braces under his pants were included. In a video showing the lead up to the opening, we see Disney greats Leota Toombs and Harriet Burns working on coloring and clothing the presidents. It was quite the achievement in its execution, even a decade later from the original plan.
Oh, yeah. And this was something that was at the forefront of all their marketing for Walt Disney World when it opened. There are things that would be featured in every write-up and every piece of artwork, the posters, like the Magic of Walt Disney World poster, all the promo stuff would have 20,000 Leagues. They would have the Hall of Presidents. They would have, this handful of things. They'd have the Contemporary, this handful of things.
Country Bears.
Country Bears would be a big one, yeah. And Hall of Presidents was a real cornerstone of their pitch.
Yeah, it feels like a thesis statement of a significant branch of what they were doing at the time. They don't go in as much for the Americana these days because they're such a global thing, but it's like the apex of that. And obviously they would go on to do American Adventure, but it's the same kind of thing. So Hall of Presidents opened in 1971. It remained unchanged, save the addition of the presidents, until it got a major redo in 1993, where the emancipation and slavery became more central. Maya Angelou became the narrator, and of course, we had the current president, then Bill Clinton, speak. Michael, this was an idea of Michael Eisner's. What do you think about this decision?
That's a good question.
It's a loaded question.
That's a loaded question, something I've thought about a lot over the years. My opinion on it seems to go back and forth every 4 to 8 years, strangely enough, whether I think it's a good idea or not. When they started doing it with Clinton, I thought it was amazing. It was a very advanced animatronic for its time. And from a distance, it was really uncanny. They really nailed the characteristics and everything. So from that aspect, it's cool. From other aspects, it can be problematic. It can be polarizing. I don't know what the right answer is, to tell you the truth. What do you think?
I think I've turned against it. I think it happened before the current thing, because I think just the political era that we are in, it's too problematic. I think it becomes distracting when you're in there and people start making noises of approval or disapproval.
Whether they're clapping or booing, it's weird either way.
But I mean, it's an interesting thing. I mean, I think Clinton was really jazzed to do it. Obviously, I think there's stories about Trump being really excited to do it and making script edits.
He wanted to talk about America building buildings bigger than everyone else or something like that. And
it's an interesting opportunity for a president to send their message out. And but yeah, I would vote no. It'll be interesting to see what happens with this attraction in the future, but it would be redone again in 2009 with more of a focus on the presidents than ever before throughout the film, that is. There's a narration by Morgan Freeman, still rolling into its 50th year. One assumes Joe Biden will be added soon. Again, along with the Country Bears, these are two attractions that were unique to Florida at the opening of Walt Disney World, and they're still in operation to this day. So they made it. They've stood the test, Michael.
Yeah, and I hope it stays. I know we live in a bizarre time, and something like this isn't seen the way it probably was in 1971, and it's like a loaded minefield, but it's so cool, and I really hope it stays. It's still impressive to see all the presidents on the stage, and it's something fun to take people who have never been to Disney World before, and they think it's all going to be just like roller coasters and like Dumbo and carnival rides or whatever, and take them to something like that and really show the range of what Disney can do. And it's still pretty staggering when that curtain comes up on all those guys.
Oh yeah, and it's not quite a circle, but which I picture in my mind. But the space is incredible. It's huge, and the scale of the film and the stage is incredible. So
it really is.
It is quite the spectacle, and I just love watching all the presidents doing incidental movements. It's just
Yes.
amazing.
They're all programmed to like fiddle around and watch people as they talk, and it's just fun to watch them do their thing.
Right. So as we said, the art from Hall of Presidents adorns some sites in the parks, but also some of the presidents exist outside the attraction, right, Michael?
Yeah, that's true. Especially in Epcot, you would see this. When Epcot opened, they had to make a lot of new sculpts for a lot of new figures, hundreds of figures. And so you may see some familiar faces popping up. The one that I always knew about was President Taft. He used to be a servant. Now he's a priest.
That's right.
In Egypt, fanning the Pharaoh. It's good old President Taft standing
And he
there.
is clear as day. I mean, he is good, partially because you go right by him, but also it's just kind of an oddly distinctive animatronic that
Yeah, it
kind of at
is.
times has made me nervous because of its kind of lifelike qualities.
Yeah, totally. And there are others. I was recently looking up a list for another thing I was working on, and there are allegedly quite a few. Though another one that is obvious to the viewer is Andy Jackson.
Yes.
Who is in the Renaissance scene, who's been moved around a couple of times over the years, but he's still in there. And he is very clearly Andy Jackson. So that's another one to look out for while you're on there.
My favorite that is alleged, but not quite. Well, there's two that I love that are alleged, but I am not sure if they're actual. But Teddy Roosevelt as a centurion.
Yes.
And my favorite is Dwight Eisenhower as a lute player. Now, whether or not those are actual, I cannot say. But the Taft and the Jackson are definitely them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's funny to imagine. It was a tribute to Walt's friend Ike that they put him in there.
So go check out the Hall of Presidents next time you're at Walt Disney World. Go check out the presidents throughout ancient history at Epcot next time you're there. Earlier in the program, we talked about Walt and the Presidents, along with some presidential visits to Disneyland. After it opened, Walt Disney World would host every acting president until President Trump. Some visits were brief, but others were fairly notable. When Walt Disney World opened, President Richard Nixon was in office, and as most of you already know, he had quite the visit to the resort. Nixon was attending a meeting of AP editors at the Contemporary Resort on November 17, 1973, and had a live televised Q&A that lasted over an hour. This was in the midst of the Watergate scandal, and Nixon was trying to regain the political offensive by standing up to questioning by over 400 editors. During this, Nixon gave his famous "I'm not a crook" remark in reference to whether or not he profited from public life. He would resign the presidency the next year. I cannot imagine a president signing up for this now, Michael.
Oh no, to be grilled by more than 400 editors in a ballroom. I believe it was the Ballroom of the Americas there at the Contemporary. First, that is quite a gauntlet to run. Yes. And second, it is just amazing that this iconic moment in American history happened. This is one of like the two twin, I can't believe that was at Disney World moments. And the other was John Lennon signing the papers to break up the Beatles. Right. Which was at the Poly. So like each hotel got something special. And it was about in the same time frame too. So this was a busy time for the resort. But it's hard to it must have been quite an event, and obviously it got Nixon kind of back on his heels.
That's right. A decade later, Ronald Reagan would visit Epcot Center twice, the first time being on March 8th, 1983. Reagan gave a speech in support of his President's International Youth Exchange Initiative, which fit very well with the World Showcase Fellowship Program, a favorite of Card Walker, and the lead-up to Epcot's opening. Reagan attended a screening of the American Adventure with a group of, quote, math and science whizzes, as he called them, and was pleasantly pleased he, quote, didn't get hit with one spitball. Ah, the great communicator. Reagan made remarks after being introduced by our favorite, Dick Nunes, and it was clear that the American Adventure left quite the impression on Reagan. He made reference to quotes and moments several times during his remarks. In his diary that day, he claimed that, quote, Disney's Epcot, their World History Center, was a fascinating place. After Reagan left Disney property that day, he would give remarks to the National Association of Evangelicals in Orlando that would become known as the Evil Empire speech. During that speech, Reagan said the Soviet Union was a evil empire and, quote, the focus of evil in the modern world, and was widely viewed as a significant turning up of temperature in the Cold War rhetoric. So another moment in history there.
Yeah, really. It's as much as it's hard to believe the Nixon thing was at the Contemporary, it's hard to believe this was at least Epcot adjacent. The Evil Empire, which was a catchphrase which would really go down in history. So these were crazy times. And, like we said when we talked about the Christmas special and last 4th of July as well, it seems during this era, every Disney special would end with a message from Ronald Reagan. So he and Epcot are very tied in my brain during this period.
2 years later, Reagan would be back at Epcot Center for a unique moment on Memorial Day, 1985. Reagan had been reelected in a landslide in 1984, and his inaugural parade had been canceled due to freezing temperatures. The bands that were selected to perform that day were gathered at Epcot Center on Memorial Day for an inaugural bands parade. Reagan would fly into the Orlando International Airport and take Marine One directly to Epcot Center, where a presidential motorcade would drive around a packed World Showcase promenade, complete with onlookers and bands saluting the re-elected president and First Lady Nancy Reagan. In front of the American Adventure, Reagan would take in the parade with his wife, but not before posing with Mickey and Minnie in respective Uncle Sam and Betsy Ross outfits, with Reagan quipping about his history of kissing mice with the press. This time, Disney CEO Michael Eisner would introduce the president, who would give a bit of a policy address about tax cuts.
What else?
That's right. President Reagan would not be the only acting president to visit Epcot twice, as his successor, George H.W. Bush, would visit in 1990 and 91. In 1990, Bush visited after remarks to the American Farm Bureau Federation and would tour the land and the living seas, Michael.
Yeah, there are some fun pictures out there of him in the little lab there at the land, learning from the scientists there. So it's fun to think of a president wandering backstage through the greenhouses there at the land.
It's pretty cool to think that it was that relevant at that point. And I would argue the land and living seas are still pretty relevant.
Absolutely. And national news, national news covering that sort of thing.
In 1991, as part of Walt Disney World's 20th anniversary celebration, Bush would appear again in the American Pavilion at Epcot to honor the 575 daily points of light the president made in his push for the Points of Light Foundation, a nonprofit that would encourage volunteering in communities. As Michael Eisner was on the board of the foundation, he would be actively involved in the proceedings, as would Ron Allen, CEO of Delta Airlines. Disney patriotic entertainment stalwarts Lee Greenwood and Sandy Patty would also be in attendance to make sure everything got appropriately bombastic.
That is perfect. They must have just had them on speed dial.
Right. We need you again.
This was, I don't know, what year was that? 4th of July we talked about. This is several years after that. So they were still on the speed dial.
They were. President Bill Clinton wouldn't enter the theme parks as president. He had an audio animatronic to do that. But he did visit the Disney Institute in 1996. The Disney Institute.
He couldn't believe he was doing this. I hope he learned how to climb a rock wall or make a topiary. I love this topiary.
President Bush's son, George W. Bush, would speak at fundraisers at the Grand Floridian and the Contemporary, and Barack Obama would give remarks in front of Cinderella Castle in 2012, promoting tourism as part of the economic recovery from the Great Recession. President Trump would be the first acting president to miss a trip to Walt Disney World, though he had one scheduled in 2019 that was canceled. He was slated to make remarks at the Grand Floridian, which, that is the most appropriate resort for Trump to appear at, you would think.
I suppose so. Yeah, there was a great picture of the Clintons when they were young, when he was governor of Arkansas, down at Disney World during, I can't remember whether it was the 15th anniversary or one of those celebrations of them with a young Chelsea there, and like wearing those like Donald Duck hats like I used to have with the Donald Duck
Nice.
bill and on the cap. So that's pretty good. And also Hillary was there when I was on college program to do the 25th anniversary sort of rededication there in front of the castle with the jets flying over. So
That's right.
They were all over the place.
Yeah, President Clinton couldn't make that one because he was brokering peace in the Middle East.
Oh, well,
which is a good
I guess
excuse.
that's more important.
Clinton was bullish about his audio animatronic in Hall of Presidents because he had been there before, and he loved it so much. So
Yeah, he was like really excited. I remember reading like how excited he was to do that, so that's fun. Also, I remember at one of the festivities, I don't know whether it was at the DNC convention or during a inaugural thing, but at some point they showed a little sizzle reel about Barack Obama's life. I can't remember whether this was when he was nominated or when he was elected, and talking about his youth and his childhood and growing up and his family and this and that. And there was one photo, it was, a bunch of old photos, and one of them was like, I recognize that planter he's sitting on. And so I went back and rewound, and it was him with, I guess, his mom maybe, and I can't remember who. But he was young, and they were in Tomorrowland at the Magic Kingdom.
Oh,
so
wow.
that's his story.
How
I want to
cool.
know. That's a story I want to know. I've never heard any more elaboration on that, but he went there as a youth, at least.
Interesting. So if you're a historian, you may have noticed that I skipped over President Jimmy Carter, and that was because he may have had the most intriguing visit to Walt Disney World on October 1st, 1978. The president would be a keynote speaker at the 26th World Congress of the International Chamber of Commerce, an international body of businesses that handles disputes, suggests policy, and helps handle rulemaking. This was not insignificant, as World Congresses typically occurred in capital cities, so quite the get for Walt Disney World Resort.
Yeah, this was a big deal because it was usually held in, places like Washington or London or whatever. Holding it in Orlando, much less at Bay Lake at Walt Disney World, it was a really, really big deal because this was a big event with lots of delegates from all around the world.
That's right. So I have come upon the President's Briefing book for October 1st, 1978. And I thought it'd be fun to go through his day and talk about it. seems like a dream day for our interests. So let's talk about President Carter's day at Walt Disney World. At 12:35 p.m., the president leaves the White House for Andrews Air Force Base, where he takes Air Force One to the Kennedy Space Center, arriving at 2:30, heading to Pad A. En route, there will be a driving tour of the Orbiter Mate/Demate facility, and interestingly, the shuttle landing facility. So this was before the shuttle was slated to land elsewhere. There, he will be briefed on how Pad A will be used for the Shuttle Orbiter program.
It's interesting how a lot of this stuff, this was several years before, well, not that many years really, in the scheme of things, before the orbiter actually started, but they were already building all these things.
So afterwards, the motorcade will head towards the Vehicle Assembly Building, where they will view the crawler and the mobile launch platform, and get briefed on Firing Room 1, which will be the launch control for the first shuttle flight. Now, at this time, they expected the flight to be in the next year, in 1979. And in a briefing that Carter got in the month before, they were trying to convince him to go down to Kennedy Space Center because of this awards ceremony we'll get to in a second, but also because, well, the shuttle is probably going to be launching at the end of next year, so you're going to want to see everything about it. So a lot of the thrust of this was throw all these details about the shuttle to Jimmy Carter, who was an engineer. So he was
That's right.
getting all the info here.
Yeah, a real scientist president, been on those nuclear subs.
That's right. That's right. So afterwards, the president would be received by astronauts and their families. And this was an exciting day. It was the 20th anniversary of NASA. And to celebrate, they introduced the Congressional Space Medal. And the inaugural class was Neil Armstrong, Frank Borman, Charles Conrad, John Glenn, Gus Grissom, posthumously, Alan Shepard. So those are some pretty big names for that first class.
That's really cool. What a cool event.
I know. That's what I'm saying. This is the coolest day of all time. So he goes and meets them and the deputy director of Kennedy Space Center, along with the governor of Florida. And at 3:47, the president, his wife, and daughter, along with these astronauts, will witness an audio-visual display simulating the countdown and liftoff of Apollo 11.
Oh, now I wonder what this was. Because,
I do
they
too.
have that now at the Apollo Center, but that wasn't there then. They didn't have like the full like tourist experience. So I wonder what this was.
I don't know, but evidently it was quite real, as the astronauts, he would later remark, had sweaty palms after, and felt the realism of the event. So,
oh, that's cool.
I know. So at 4:13, the president will attend the Congressional Space Medal Awards ceremony, where he will make remarks and present the awards to the astronauts mentioned. And there was a space shuttle orbiter behind them and in the VAB. It was just a really cool ceremony. So at 5:10, the president and family depart Kennedy Space Center on Marine One for a 40-minute trip, Michael, to the Lake Buena Vista Stoll Airfield.
Oh, this is great. Long after it had stopped being used for commercial trips, it's good to see it get a little attention.
That's right. And they will be met by the President and Secretary General of the ICC, the Chairman of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and Bob Matheson, VP of Operations at Walt Disney World. It says in the briefing that Bob coordinated Amy's visit to Walt Disney World, who was their daughter.
Yeah, she had traveled there at some point, I believe. The president's daughters had been frequent visitors. I think Gerald Ford's daughter came down for the premiere of River Country. So
oh, wow.
the daughters loved Disney World.
Interesting. So at 5:58, now this is the real crux of the day, the motorcade arrives at the Contemporary Resort Hotel, where they will be met by Card Walker, President CEO, Don Tatum, Chairman, Dick Nunes, Executive VP, and Bob Allen, who is also a VP. And the first family will be transported to their suite for personal time. So this is where Jimmy Carter gets his presentation on Epcot. Michael, what was going on with Epcot at this time?
Well, this was the real turning point. Well, Epcot had a lot of turning points, but this was a real turning point, as they had sort of fiddled around with the idea for several years. They had had the separate ideas for a World Showcase and for the Future World Theme Center. A few years prior, they had, famously pushed the models together to decide to make a single park called Epcot Center that would have Future World and World Showcase. And 1978, they kind of came up with the Epcot that we know today, with the Harper Golf-inspired lagoon, with the countries around the lagoon that look like not this modern interpretation, but these very sort of symbolic old school representations of the countries, and then the pavilions that were kind of the pavilions that we know today. And a lot of the art we know, for those of us who are into Epcot history, and in the early days, a lot of the promotional artwork that we saw, when the park opened and stuff, kind of dates to this period, because this starts to be like modern Epcot as we know it. And man, they were doing a big push. They had an office in Washington, D.C. They had had that since the Ford administration, where they had been working on sort of pitching World Showcase. They had an office in New York where they were pitching it to corporations for Future World. And it was a big deal. And they were getting down to actually getting ready for construction. Construction wouldn't start till 1979, but they were really locking in the design. So this was a big deal, and the Chamber of Commerce was a way to push it to countries and to corporations. So it was a really nice fit for the big PR push that they needed.
Yeah, I mean, imagining the pitch he got was the full Monty of, all kinds of blue sky ideas of the Epcot that we ended up getting.
Yeah, if you see like pictures of the pitch, because there are, pictures out there of him sort of getting pitched to by Marty, or, getting pitched to by, the execs, by Card and stuff. And, Marty's kind of lurking there on the periphery, and they've got these sort of, I don't know what you would call them, but the kind of boards that you pin things up to, sort of upholstered partition boards with artwork pinned up on them. And, one for each pavilion with all the really nice, Herb Ryman concept art for all the different theme pavilions. And so they got walked through. Like you said, it was the full on pitch, and pavilion by pavilion, and you had all the heavy hitters there.
That would have been so cool to see. So after that, some personal time. We got the staff office, room 4807 on the 12th floor. The guest holding room is 4846 on the 12th floor, and dinner will be available on the 14th floor. So the two club levels of the Contemporary are at the Carter's disposal. What a time.
Oh, man. That is a sweet deal.
Yes. So at 7:20, the motorcade will be off again en route to the Magic Kingdom and Cinderella Castle. The president will first make remarks at King Stephen's Banquet Hall at 7:38, and then be taken to a holding room. And I think this is where all the entertainment uses this room. It's kind of in the front right as you're facing the castle. There's a little door right beside the drawbridge, which is all diagrammed in the briefing notes for the day.
Oh, that's nice. That's convenient.
At 8:35, the president will make remarks before the Congress, declaring the opening of the Congress, followed by a performing of It's a Small World by a choir and a fireworks display. But I don't believe this ended up happening, however, as I found a recounting from the Canadian weekly Maclean's, which had this recap. One of the few intentional jokes there came from Carter. "I was looking forward to seeing Fantasyland," he said, "partly because it's a source of inspiration for my economic advisors."
Oh, Jimmy, no.
Perhaps understandably, nobody laughed, and just as Carter finished his address, a torrential rainstorm sent everyone looking for shelter. The last that any of the 2,500 delegates saw of the president, he was scurrying into the depths of Cinderella's castle. Perhaps the clock was about to strike midnight.
Ooh.
McLean's.
Yeah, it stormed really, really bad that night.
So bummer they missed their big finale there.
I know.
Afterwards, the president's back to the Stoll port and to Kennedy Space Center, Andrews Air Force Base, and at midnight is back on the lawn of the White House. But, this was his only trip to Kennedy Space Center. And the next year, the shuttle ran out of money. The shuttle program ran out of money. They were supposed to launch that year. And they came to President Carter, who had kind of been the least cooperative president with NASA to that point, and he gave them all the money they needed. So you wonder if this was the day that it was very influential in Epcot and the shuttle program's history.
Yeah, that could have been. That's very interesting. It obviously must have made an impression on him, seeing it all in person. That's wild. I just wish I could have known who he toasted in King Stephen's banquet hall.
No. What a day. What a day had Jimmy Carter.
I know. I hate he didn't get to stick around and hang out a while.
I know. Indeed. Take a water sprite out. Maybe he did. Maybe that's a secret.
He and Pablo Cruz could hit Discovery Island. As part of our year-long observation of Walt Disney World's 50th anniversary, our shows this year will feature a new segment entitled Remember the Magic. This will allow us to take a kind of casual look at areas of the Vacation Kingdom through a historical lens, walking through each land and examining what used to be there in years past. We got a lot to talk about, Jeff.
Oh, yeah. Big. It's time to remember the magic.
Time to remember the magic. Yes. And we're starting off, obviously, with Liberty Square. At 6 acres, Liberty Square isn't one of the Magic Kingdom's biggest themed lands, but it is one of the most significant. As we've discussed in the past, it was the fruition of a long-time Imagineering dream to create a land based on the Revolutionary period. As the Magic Kingdom's new and exclusive land, something that had never been seen before at Disneyland, Liberty Square received a lot of press coverage in the lead-up to Walt Disney World's opening. So let's stroll through this quaint little land and see what's there. Liberty Square, it has a lot of different architectural influences. You start with Dutch New Amsterdam at the entrance. You have a little Williamsburg across the way. As you go further into the land, if you go to the right, it gets more New England-y. And to the left towards Frontierland, it looks more like the Northwest Territory. And it all ends up, as you go into Frontierland, you cross the Little Mississippi, and, a little stream under a footbridge represents the Mississippi, and then you're out west. So it's a nice, what do you think about the aesthetic of this area?
Right, this is one of my favorite spots. I mean, the detail is great, but it's so uniquely Walt Disney World, literally the only place that has this land, but also where it is in the geography of Disney World. I feel like the New England-y parts mesh well with Fantasyland, the Northwest Territory kind of Frontierland parts. It just kind of morphs into Frontierland and kind of looks like a trip through American history or across the West, if you want to view it that way. It's just really neat how they put it all together as a whole. I also wanted to, I mean, I wish they would have, in early renderings of Liberty Square, speaking of Dutch New Amsterdam, they had a windmill at the entrance of Liberty Square, which is a really cool take.
Yes, there in that Ryman artwork, that would have
Right.
been very neat. Yeah, as you say, I really love the flow from, you enter over this bridge that originally was made to look like Concord Bridge in New England, and it is going through history. I love the conceptual leap of going to about sort of St. Louis, about where the Diamond Horseshoe is, and then crossing that Mississippi, and then being in Frontierland, and then going westward from there. It's such a great concept, and something that I wish, I don't know, it was even more elaborated upon, because it really is a neat little thing, and it's a fun period to explore in American history. So, as I said, the old entry bridge was a very arched bridge. This was the one that the park opened with in 1971. It had a courtyard of flags on the hub side. These were the flags of the 13 original colonies, and they kind of surrounded the entrance to the bridge that went across to the land. And it was very prominent back in the day because the trees were all very short. You could see these flagpoles sticking up there. And it was very, I don't know, a ceremonial entrance, it really felt like, with those flags and that big arched colonial looking bridge going over. It was slightly decurved, the bridge was, in the 70s to accommodate America on Parade, because the parade started using these bigger and bigger floats. So they were having kind of like a turtle trying to get across. They would kind of get stranded or scrape if they went across that arched bridge. So it got lowered a little bit.
America on Parade changed everything.
It changed the world as we know it. In 1991, they added a lot of the theming you see around the entrance now, these brick walls, and there's a little guardhouse there. There was a plaque added talking about the land, and a sign saying, Liberty Square. The flags were moved away further in the land. We'll see them a little bit later. And a lot of the theming you see there dates to the early 90s. And then in the 2000s, the bridge was totally flattened as they kind of went through and did that throughout the hub area.
I like this change. I like that when they put the guardhouse up and the brick walls, and it's a special place for me as the corner of Main Street and Liberty. The entrance to Liberty Square is where I did parade control for the Main Street Electrical Parade when I worked in Fantasyland. Even later, I'd pick up extra shifts when I worked on Main Street. But yeah, we would have VIPs, and over there on the right before the bridge where the guardhouse is, there's like a little alcove there where VIPs could sit and watch the parade. So that entrance, I would always go up to the guardhouse and look in there, and like little cannonballs there, just little bits of business. A nice little entrance to match the other entrances to all the other lands.
Yes, it feels, this entire land has a lot of propping and theming that's really fun and authentic and feels very period accurate. And it's fun to see that brought kind of forward in the hub, because the old bridge was cool, the original bridge, but then with the flags there, it was just kind of anticlimactic, I feel. And now there's a real nice little entrance area that really brings the theme forward a little bit. So I think that was an upgrade for sure. So now you cross over. To the right is Sleepy Hollow Refreshments.
Yes.
A classic to this day. Speaking of Dutch New Amsterdam, this building mimics Washington Irving's estate, Sunnyside, which is in Tarrytown, New York. If you pull up pictures of that, you will see that it looks pretty much just like this. So this is an old, Washington Irving being the author of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, upon which, Ichabod and Mr. Toad, the Ichabod part of Ichabod and Mr. Toad was based, and then Sleepy Hollow Refreshments here in the park. And this is a fun little building. Early on, you could go inside. It used to be a place where you went inside to get snacks. Right. They had drinks and sandwiches. In early listings, it would say snacks and specialty punch.
Mm.
So I don't know what was special about the punch, but it sounds special. Truth in advertising. By 1982, it was sponsored by Nestle, and it featured Toll House cookies.
Yes.
And this is the Sleepy Hollow that I remember, because you could get fresh Toll House cookies, and they were very good. You could get a hot chocolate. I remember they had hot chocolate and a Toll House cookie.
Man, this is to this day a stopping point, a pilgrimage site. It's one of my favorite quick service places.
Yeah, it's changed a lot over the years. They had funnel cakes, I know, and then the waffles came in. The waffles became a thing. These big waffles. There's the Nutella waffle, and then there's like a savory sort of chicken waffle, and they have ice cream cookie sandwiches and all sorts of things that are good. But now, I think around 1997, it changed to its current configuration where you just go by a window on the outside and get your order, and then there's a seating area behind. But it's changed over the years.
I mean, then now they have that churro ice cream sandwich. So, I mean,
That's correct. I had forgotten about that. And now that's what I'm going to be thinking about throughout the rest of this episode. But yeah, it's been pretty menu upgraded over the years, from prepackaged sandwiches to this to that. I would not mind a return of the fresh baked cookies, I gotta say.
oh yeah,
But
absolutely.
everything they've got there now is pretty on point. So to the left of your forward path, you've got Sleepy Hollow on your right. To your left, there are a trio of buildings that it's actually one big building split up into three little parts. This was originally three different shops. So the first store you see on the left would be Mademoiselle Lafayette's Parfumerie, which is a Disney World version of Disneyland's Mademoiselle Antoinette's Perfumery. So made a little more patriotic for the
Still
East
French.
Coast. Still French. Yes, absolutely. This was an establishment where, much like the one at Disneyland, you could mix your own perfumes, which was a big deal. In 1971, they said this perfume shop is one of 4 in the United States that allows ladies to blend fragrances of their choice. The shop features 750 blends, which make over 800 different scents. Guests purchasing perfume will be given an identification number so that they may reorder their personal fragrance by mail at a later date, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
Get your own little serial number, tell them how to make it up later. Said that the hostesses at Mademoiselle Lafayette's Parfumerie will be given extensive education in perfumes and the art of perfumery. So I'm guessing there were a few gender-specific locales early in the Magic Kingdom period. So I'm guessing only female cast members were working here, judging from how they talk about it.
Tour guides and the perfumery.
Swan boats.
Right, swan boats.
Swan boats were ladies. Jungle cruise were gentlemen. So
That's right.
by 1979, I found a listing of the price range of the options here. Prices ranged from $4 to $150 in 1979 bucks. So that's
Man.
good. Yeah. Later, it was absorbed. This was the first of these 3 shops to go away. It was absorbed into the antique shop in 1986. A lot of guide maps from that era said that it sold Annette Funicello's Cello brand perfume, which I was unaware of, but apparently was a thing that deserved calling out on the guide map, nonetheless. So it was absorbed into the antique shop in 86, and then a decade later, in 1996, it became part of Ye Old Christmas Shoppy, which is what is there now. All 3 of these original shops became the Christmas shop. It's now themed to look like a music teacher's store, even though it's Christmas goods. Has a sign out front saying that Ichabod Crane is offering music lessons. So that ties in with Sleepy Hollow across the way. What do you think about the perfume mixing conceit?
Well, this is, as we'll get to, these stores in Liberty Square are just such a themed experience. And you wonder how they were, I mean, gosh, I wish they were still there. But you also can see how in the 80s when Eisner and Wells get in, that they're like, okay, we've got to make more money everywhere. These places can't be making money. Because it's like, I don't know how they could have made money. I mean, how many people were ordering perfume? But it's an amazing idea. I wonder how many people were happy with their personal blends and ordered more. That was always such a fascinating little addition that they would do.
I agree. Yeah, I think you're right. And we'll talk momentarily about how management's view at Disney World in the 70s was that merchandising was part of the show. It was not solely a means of making money. It was, although that was important, a lot of merchandising was specifically show based. And when Eisner and them came in, it it became the system where every individual location had to justify its existence financially, and that sort of killed these shops. You mentioned New Orleans Square. This part of the park was very much Magic Kingdom's answer to New Orleans Square. In its unique land, it's sort of curling in on itself. And the shops there, the perfumeries, both had antique shops. The Disneyland had the one-of-a-kind shop, which was one of Walt's favorites. In Liberty Square, there was Old World Antiques, which is the next shop over from the perfumery. This opened in March of 1972. In 1971, it was said that when the shop opened, merchandise varying in price from $5 to $15,000 would be offered. Yeah. Said it would specialize in authentic antiques plus reproductions obtained by Disney buyers from around the world. Each piece was guaranteed to be authentic. It would include the place and year of origin, and those would be guaranteed as well as the quality of its craftsmanship. Buyers would try to record the story for each item when they found them, and that would be kept on record so that interested guests who wanted to know more about each piece would be able to look it up in the store. Even if they were just browsing and they wanted to know what something was, the cast member there could look up in the books and see, where this thing came from, what its story was, which is really cool, I think. The shop was meant to represent America's early years when immigrants brought in their cultures and customs from overseas, and so it dealt exclusively in objects from abroad, which is interesting in this colonial era where everything was sort of American colonial. This was exclusive, as it says, old world antiques. So it was stuff that people had brought over from overseas with them when they immigrated. This was all the provenance of a guy named Otto Robbie, who was the Disney buyer. And once or twice a year, he would spend about 8 weeks searching for unusual objects in Europe, in Italy, France, England, Denmark, Spain, Germany, wherever. Some of the items that were listed in 1973 were a bronze 18th century chandelier with coiling cobras and grotesque gargoyles, and an English rocking horse from 1780. So just imagine going to the Magic Kingdom and you come out with your Mickey ears and balloon and whatever, and an English rocking horse from 1780.
Maybe some gargoyles.
Yeah, buy a chandelier at the Magic Kingdom. I love this idea. I wish this place was still there. It would be so cool to just look around.
I know. I mean, it's like, again, you can see where the business people coming in the 80s are like, well, what are you all doing? This place is not making any money. But I think about these places as like, if you think about a place like Knott's, and they have all these areas devoted to little museum and roadside attraction type things. This is just like another level up of that, where they're getting authentic stuff, and they can make some money off of it, but it's definitely an attraction for sure.
Absolutely, it is just as much a part of the show as the real rides and stuff. And I think Knott's is a good comparison. This is like upper fancy version of that. And these were not inexpensive things. In 1979, they said prices range from $5 to $2,000. They had a 19th century 3-wheeled padded leather invalid chair. So
Wow.
imagine coming
Okay.
back from vacation with that. Otto Robbie said in an interview at the time, primarily, I try to find objects that will interest, amuse, and attract as wide a variety of people as possible. The joy of my work is in finding the truly unique item that one sees perhaps once in a lifetime. He went on to say, our shops are essentially attractions for our guests. We want people to feel free to visit and to browse, to ask questions, and to share antique anecdotes with the shop hosts and hostesses. It isn't necessary to buy antiques to enjoy them. We have many guests who return time and time again simply to look at an item that has struck their fancy. So
See?
that's the thought that goes into it. It was not a big moneymaker. I've seen interviews with old timers who were there at the time who said, it on an annual basis did not make a lot of money, but it was seen by management as really good show. It was part of the show.
Yeah. And it's like not that big of a footprint. How important is it to make a lot of money? It seems the importance of it anyway.
Right. Well, and the shop had shipping facilities that would deliver anywhere in the world. They said that they would have people call from as far away as Australia, people who had seen something there and it kind of stuck in their brain, and they'd go home and then they'd call up and have it delivered. And so they would deliver anywhere in the world. So this was an interesting little location. There was a location at the Village that Otto Robbie also provided goods for. And but this location closed in 1996, combined with the stores next door, become the Old World Christmas Shop. Now it is supposed to be a wood carver shop. That's its theming. It has some, carving utensils and things in there. So that's the second of these three shops. The third, as you went along to your left, is the silversmith, Johnny Tremaine, proprietor. So that ties in with something we've talked about a lot, Mr. Tremaine and the Sons of Liberty. 1971, it said this store will feature items that were popular during the 1700s and specializes in decorative gifts and personal jewelry in pewter, stainless, and sterling. 1975 said the offerings included rows of sterling and plated silverware and jewelry, silver teapots, coffee services, which I'm sure you would like, candlesticks and snuffers, bells and vases, specially designed sterling silver plates commemorating the bicentennial. Of course.
Of course.
1979, it said price ranged from $3 to $2,300. So
Boy.
you could buy some nice silver stuff there. And this, to me, really is a throwback to the plans for Liberty Street, where they were going to have a silversmith.
Yes.
And,
direct.
These sort of craftsmen working there where you could see them do their trade and then buy items. So I think not only would this was a very cool place to look at neat things. It would be a great thing to bring back and a great thing to have maybe some work done there on the site to see how it was done. I feel like that's a kind of Williamsburg-y, Knott's-like thing that is kind of missing from Liberty Square now, where to see people sort of plying their trade and these old, see some candle dippers and things like that. That would be fun.
Yeah. And again, it's not that big of a space, so why not? What's the value of having somebody in there that people like to visit? So,
right. It would draw people. That would be neat. It too became the Old World Christmas Shoppy in 1996. Now it's supposed to be the home of a Pennsylvania Dutch family, the Keppels. And there's a little sign out front for the Keppels. That's an homage to Keppel Disney, who was Walt's grandfather. And he was born in Ireland and immigrated to the New World with his parents in 1834. They came through New York. So Keppel gets some representation here in the Magic Kingdom.
well, and I will give them credit for really putting a lot of thought into differentiating these places, even though it's the same shop. It's nice when you're in there. It still feels good, even though you wish that it was this old way. They have done a lot. It feels nice in there.
Right. Well, and the area behind the shop is home to probably one of the most obscure things in Liberty Square. This was a courtyard that used to be way out of the way before they added the Adventureland the bridge over to Adventureland. I don't know, earlier this century at some point. This was a little closed off courtyard where it dead ended. There wasn't anything back there. And there was a snack bar called the Fife and Drum Refreshments, which you can still see. The window is still there on the back of one of the buildings. After the Magic Kingdom opened, they didn't have enough food service because everything had been done really quickly. And the first couple of years were spent really trying to add more capacity for refreshments and things. So in 1972, the Fife and Drum was added back here, serving drinks and prepackaged sandwiches, things like that. And just kind of a soda stand. And it lasted till about, I've found things saying about 1987. I have a feeling it's one of those things that started being seasonal and then just kind of trickled away. But it's a fun little vestige of old Disney World history. You can still see kind of closed up back there. Go take your picture with it. Get a selfie with the Fife and Drum.
When I was there in the Magic Kingdom tour, they would call it the Enchanted Glen at that time because Peter Pan would show up there at the end of tour. But man, it is a really cool place. Even now, it is kind of untouched, even though they built this, bridge through there. So people are coming through there. But the stone planters there, there's a beautiful tree. It's a really peaceful place even now. But before that bridge was there, it was like nobody was back there, and it was just a dead end. It was, it's amazing that they put something back there to draw people.
I know. Well, it's one of those places where you would always try and like shortcut and then realize there was no shortcut. You're like,
Right.
oh, I'm going to be smart and cut over to Adventureland through here. And like, oh, wait, there's no way to get through here. And a few times over the years, they had, when Pocahontas came out, they had a little Pocahontas area back there where you could meet her. Also, when Princess and the Frog came out, Tiana had a little stage back there where she would come out and do meet and greets. And so they've kind of used it for that a few times over the years. And like you said, the characters will come out and appear there. But otherwise, it's a pretty much untouched little corner. So a nice place to get out of the crowd. Back across the way, across from the exit of Hall of Presidents, actually, is the Heritage House. This was 1971 patriotic merchandise, mainly plates, plaques, and unique items designed to complement the Hall of Presidents. This had a lot of stuff you would see at, say, like a history museum or like a historical, like a state park where an old president's home or something like that. Like pewter and china items. They had bottles and china decorated with pictures of presidents, bisque and pewter statues reliving American moments such as Paul Revere's ride or a colonial craftsman forging horseshoes. So you could get a statue of that. They would sell parchment reproductions of famous historical speeches and declarations. So if you wanted your like printout of the Constitution, this is where you would get it. They had in 1979, it said the prices range from 10 cents to $1,500. So I'm not sure what that would be. So they had bicentennial merchandise up to $4,000.
Okay.
So you could really blow out. I should have gone through and done like dollar conversions for this stuff because it's high dollar items, man. And that was another thing these shops would do. This was a big thing in World Showcase too. There would be a super high dollar item that was there as like a conversation piece. I remember there was an enormous, like human-sized teddy bear in the UK pavilion that was there for decades. That was like, I don't know, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And it shows up in people's vacation pictures because they would go take a picture of it because it was cool.
Yeah.
And, people would talk about it, but nobody would ever buy it. But it was there as, a showpiece. This continued for a long time, this Heritage House, offering patriotic souvenirs, but in 2014 it closed and became a My Magic Plus location. So now it's kind of a guest services locale.
Man, and this place was one of my favorite little places because, I love history centers and I'm a big fan of history. They always had a bunch of little things here and kind of things you wouldn't find anywhere else. And I will shout out the Parrish brothers at Wedway Radio who really bemoaned its closure. They like me, really loved this store.
Yeah, it was a president-focused place, which was kind of neat, and they did have a lot of fun things. A lot of books. I remember in later days, a lot of books and
Mm-hmm.
things. Very, very cool. And of course, this is all leading up to the Hall of Presidents, which we have discussed in its Liberty Hall setting. The date above the door is 1787, which is the year the Constitution was created. And this is the centerpiece. This is what the whole land was built around, really. We'll move on from the Hall of Presidents, but always duck in, see some of the exhibits that are in the lobby. Some really cool real historical artifacts belonging to the
That's right.
presidents.
Got W's cowboy boots. Or used to, at least.
Yeah, sure do. And Teddy Roosevelt stuff and FDR stuff. There, it's always pretty interesting to see what they've got in there. First lady gowns and items belonging to the first ladies. So, interesting things. The Hall of Presidents, of course, was originally in its first year. It didn't have that little portico out front. That was added later, and then they added that sort of extended queue in 1972 because it was such a popular attraction.
Couldn't keep people in there. I mean, they were just waiting outside.
Exactly. It was, these shows that were new like that, the Country Bears, were showstoppers. So we'll continue past the Hall of Presidents and look straight ahead to the Liberty Square Riverboat. A great ride, an overlooked ride, I fear.
The weenie of the land.
Weenie O' the land. Originally in this area, before you reach the landing, as Foxy at Passport to Dreams has well documented, there was to be a sort of market building, a sort of freestanding building that would kind of have served as a weenie there, and probably fell victim to budget cuts. But that would have been there. There would have been a couple of little houses on the side to the right, kind of where that market area is now. And those would have had craftsman shops, kind of like what we were talking about before. So that would have been neat. But we do have the riverboat. Back in the day, it was a D ticket attraction. I found in 1989, it was sponsored by Treetop Incorporated. Originally, the steamship was the Admiral Joe Fowler, which was named after Senior Vice President of Walt Disney Productions for Engineering and Construction. He was instrumental. He was actually an admiral, instrumental to the creation of Walt Disney World. It was a 5/8 scale recreation of a 19th century stern-wheeler riverboat, diesel-powered, made of teak wood and fiberglass. It was constructed in St. Petersburg, Florida at the Morgan Yacht Company and assembled at the dry dock at Walt Disney World. It had 2 smokestacks. The current ship has 1. It had double smokestacks. It had 3 decks, the main deck, the promenade deck, and the Texas deck. On the center deck, the promenade deck, it had a small stage where entertainment groups could perform, which I thought was neat. Mm-hmm. Had a larger capacity than the other ship, 450 passengers as opposed to 400. Unfortunately, Admiral Joe Fowler, the ship, was irreparably damaged in 1980 in a dry dock accident. It was undergoing routine maintenance, and basically they dropped it and broke the keel, I suppose is what happened. But
Whoops.
They sort of stripped it for parts and buried it, which is kind of grim. I don't know where. That would be a fun little archaeology project. It was supplemented and later replaced by the Richard F. Irvine, which came online in 1973. It was named after Richard Irvine, who was Executive Vice President, Chief Operations Officer, and Vice Chairman of the Board of WED Enterprises, which is now Imagineering. So he was head of Imagineering when Walt Disney World was being built, passed away probably, I'm guessing, around 1973. It was in the early 70s. This was a steel hull ship. Its hull and superstructure were built by Todd Shipyards in California, with final construction and finishing done at Walt Disney World. Its Scotch Marine boiler was designed and built by Dixon Boiler Works in California, and it was a 3-decker. Still is. It's the Liberty Bell now. It was renamed the Liberty Bell in 1996. And this is one, it's seen a lot of narration changes over the years, but it's still there plying the rivers of America.
Yeah, I wonder if the Fowler was not built well, because they go back to Todd Shipyards where they built the Mark Twain hull from.
That's right.
But
That's right.
I've heard that they were thinking about bringing the Columbia to Walt Disney World. It's just interesting to me that they would build 2 riverboats. That seems super intense. Early Walt Disney World days where they were trying to desperately manage with the crowds they had, but just double the riverboats.
Double the riverboats, yeah, twice as good. But it's not like they built the same one. It was a different design.
Right.
So it's not like, oh, it would get 2 for the price of 1, so to speak. And the Columbia would have fit the theme of Liberty Square, I feel, better than the steamboat. Because, you have the Columbia Harbor House, and to have the Columbia sailing ship would have fit quite nicely, I believe.
But yeah, this is one of my must-dos. I would definitely put it as a D ticket in my current ticket book. I love the riverboat. It's one of my very favorite things to do.
Yeah, this is one that I would encourage people always to do. These are the things that people often overlook, but they really make up the special texture of the park. And I would encourage everyone to ride the steamship. Take it around.
Let me just say, too, that one thing that we found by accident in Disneyland is Dole Whip on the riverboat is very good. So
yes,
consider that.
Take your snacks, enjoy, take a spin around, and see what there is to see on the rivers of America. The bustling rivers of America. So I had mentioned that there was originally going to be a couple of shops built sort of across from the landing. They were never built. There was a Foxy at Passport. I asked her about this because I found in an old nomenclature guide from 1973 something called the Peddler's Passage. And according to Foxy, this was supposed to be an area between the shops that would be built, kind of where that little fruit market is now, and the Hall of Presidents show building. So there would be an alleyway there called the Peddler's Passage. And this would be very New Orleans square-y, where you have a little hidden away courtyard. You've got a passage that goes kind of between buildings, and there's a dead end and a right angle street, and it just kind of breaks up the space a little. So that would have been kind of a neat little area. What they did do there, originally there was just kind of a village green. It was kind of a green grassy hill there. And some of it was covered up by the Hall of Presidents queue when they added that sort of breezeway in 1972. In the late 1970s, the rest of the green was replaced by these circular brick planters and tables that are still there now. And, now there's that outdoor food market. This has been used for like outdoor vending a lot over the years, but now it's like a more formalized kind of setting. So, lots of fruit and drinks, I think, for people.
It was a really cool one that was a village green. I thought that was a really neat use of the space, even though it's kind of a void area from what the plan was. It's still pretty neat to have just a little garden spot right there. So I don't know. I would have liked it to stay, but I guess when you have people at kind of a little, elbow there of activity, you need to get all the space you can get for people to sit down or be on a bench or, have a food cart there or whatever.
True. But, it looks so good. In all the old pictures of the old grassy area, it looks really nice, and it feels very colonial somehow. Yes. I don't know why, but it does. Yes. Passing past this, to the left, you have the former home of the Mike Fink keelboats, which we've talked about in our Frontierland show last year. These were there from 1971 till 2001. The Bertha May and the Gullywumper. And these originally did launch from Liberty Square. They moved to Frontierland in the 1990s, but this was where they originally jumped off. The building has been used as mansion overflow queue in years since, but it's still there. It was a B ticket ride, a 12-minute trip around the river. And this is one of those things that probably wouldn't fly today. Not only was it very low capacity. It was not accessible. But, the size of people has changed. And, these boats weren't big. They were 10 feet wide. They were 10 feet from the water line to the top of the mast. And they were supposed to, in the 70s, the capacity was 38 people per boat. And so, for those of you who don't remember this, there was inside the boat, there were two seating areas where you would be on benches. You would be on a bench facing people on another bench. And then there would be little two compartments of that. So you'd have 4 benches with people sitting down. Then you would have people on the top of the boat, perched up there, which it makes me think of the stagecoach at Knott's,
Yeah, yeah.
which is still a thing, thank heavens. These are fiberglass boats with a deck of Douglas fir. They were built out at Disneyland. And what you would do is you would either sort of crawl into the boat or climb up on top. And it was essentially a Jungle Cruise type narration, but frontier themed.
The last time I rode this ride, I was thinking, I can't believe this ride is still allowed. It just didn't feel safe. And as we've said on another podcast, with the original keelboats at Disneyland were the keelboats from the Davy Crockett movie.
Yes.
I imagine they're making them over again, but they're essentially movie props that you're riding on. It just felt like it could tip over at any point.
That's the thing, is like when you see how its dimensions and then see the people perched on top and it just kind of bobbing along the water, I don't know how they just never tipped over, because they look like they really could. But I miss them, man. I miss all that motion out there on the river. It was a fun little ride. Certainly it was a slow loader because there were only 2 boats and low capacity, but it was a fun little ride around the river. Right next to the keelboat was the keelboat shop. This had a number of names over the years. It was kind of built into the same building. Around 1974 or 75, it opened as the Keelboat Hat Shoppy, with themed and character hats and monogramming there. By 1980, it became the Keelboat Shop and featured like monster stuff and magic tricks, like Monster Mask. A lot of the stuff that you would see at the House of Magic on Main Street, they would have here to go with the Haunted Mansion, and sort of spooky masks and stuff. One of the things we came across, there's a document. It's undated, so I don't know when it's from. Probably, judging from a few things, probably very late 70s or very early 80s. So it's like 79, 80, 81. They were trying to come up with some new names for the shops in Liberty Square, and they were kind of kicking around an idea, and this was called the Keelboat Shop at the time, and it may not have even had a sign. It was hard to tell from the notes, but it would have magic tricks and gags and things like that. Anyway, the memo suggested alternative names, including Huck's Devilish Delights and the Shenanigans Shoppy.
Both of which I'm all for. I'm all for them.
I know. I love the shenanigans combined with the classy shoppy.
Yeah.
It's just the
I love the thought. I mean, like, how
class.
much time went into this brainstorming session?
Oh, I know. And it had to have been like bounced by. I mean, I would guess that Marty would be involved still in that kind of decision making in that day. I want to know who came up with those, because Huck's Devilish Delights. Eventually, judging from that memo, they decided to just leave it nameless. Just go with no name there. So it was just still the Keelboat Shoppy until 1987 or 88, when it became Ichabod's Landing, another Ichabod reference. And it was still the same like magic stuff. It closed in 1996. Around this time, they had put a cart, Madame Leota's cart, there at the exit to Mansion, and this became like a storeroom, so it was no longer a shop. So this was a sort of forgotten location. Across the way, though, is a shop that is still there. It's changed a lot over the years, called the Yankee Trader. It opened in 1973 as the Yankee Peddler, spelled Pedlar, which I find interesting.
Pedlar.
Pedlar, the Yankee Pedlar. And this is where, when I was talking with Foxy about Peddler's Passage, I was like, well, what if that was a name for the breezeway to Fantasyland? What if they called that the Peddler's Passage? Because it was, by the Yankee Pedlar. But I don't know, history's mysteries, I guess. 1975 items were listed, included fish poachers and double boilers, which you could, I love the idea to, let's go to the Magic Kingdom and buy a fish poacher or a double boiler. Duck presses, butterball paddles, sandwich toasters, tasting spoons, and birch stirrers. So you can get all sorts of gourmet kitchen goods. In 1979, it was called Yankee Trader Gourmet Culinary Aids, featuring unusual cooking and serving accessories, with a price range from 25 cents to $625. So, get a really nice duck press and take it home for the kids. This was later sponsored by Smuckers, and they would have lots of jams and jellies in there. In 2014, it was closed, and it later became Memento Mori, which is the Haunted Mansion shop that is there now.
I love this store. I mean, this store was, I loved going in this store. I don't know why, but they always had little interesting kitchen stuff, and they had the nice little, they had a nice little porch on it. It's just a cool building. I mean, it's still a cool building. So luckily we have that, and the little passageway through to Fantasyland is still there. Love it. Loved it even more.
It's kind of fun. It's like the river kind of shifted around it, the river of people, and now it's open on both sides. But thankfully, the store remained, and it's still there. I wouldn't mind seeing Yankee Trader come back with its birch stirrers and such. Like you said, it was pretty neat. But of course, this is all leading up to next door, the biggest, most beloved attraction, the Columbia Harbor House. Which opened in 1972 as part of the wave of, expanding the food service. Internally, this was labeled on early blueprints famously as fish in chicks or chicken in fish on many of the early plans.
Accurate.
Accurate. I mean, I love that they knew from day one this place was going to have chicken and fish. And 50 years later, it's got chicken and fish.
That's right.
I mean, that brand is
so
strong.
much more. Yeah, it is strong. It's written into the DNA.
It's written into the DNA. And, early on the Paul Hartley Fun Map from before the park opened, it was labeled Nantucket Harbor House. But there was already a restaurateur with an establishment by that name. I've seen the letter that he had sent to the company. I don't know how he found out about it, but he wrote in being like, hey, guys, just thought you might like to know, I've got a bunch of restaurants named Nantucket Harbor House, or a restaurant called Nantucket Harbor House, and maybe we should talk about this. So then that's why they changed it to Columbia Harbor House.
Both great names. No loss there.
No. Columbia's great. The sponsors different over the years. I found in 1989 it was sponsored by Hunt Wesson Foods. And this is a great space. A great space. It's 2 floors divided up into a number of rooms. Each room named, and I'll read those names right now. The Annapolis Room, the Cape Cod Room, the Cape Hatteras Room, represent.
Whoop, whoop.
The Charleston Room, the Chesapeake Bay Room, the Long Island Room, the Marblehead Room, the Montauk Point Room, the Nantucket Room, the New Bedford Room, the New London Room, Newport Room, Plymouth Room, and Portsmouth Room. And each one is differently themed to reflect those places and geographical sort of architectural, stylistic trends. And man, it is decorated with all sorts of stuff. It's very heavily themed for a fast food place.
It's huge and it feels tiny. I think people at Disneyland would be very at home there, but it's definitely a portrait of a bygone era. I mean, It's just very labyrinth like, and it holds a ton of people, so they accomplish a lot.
Right. And it has a wonderful upstairs area, which we went through a phase where it was difficult. They would have the upstairs roped off and you couldn't get up there. And that was always a bummer because those are the best rooms in the place. There used to be an upstairs kitchen. I don't know if it's actually still there, but there was a kitchen and a serving window to sort of double up the efficiency of the place. I think maybe later they would use it for special events. I'm not sure. But it was sort of a vestigial upstairs kitchen. But those upstairs rooms, and especially the room over the breezeway to Fantasyland that looks out at Fantasyland on one side, Liberty Square on the other.
It's a high point. It's a great place.
It's coveted seating.
Yes,
Coveted.
indeed.
All these sort of hand-made window panes, things like that. A lot of colonial detail. It's really a gorgeous space.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course, across the way is, the Haunted Mansion. We won't talk much about Haunted Mansion because you know about Haunted Mansion, but its exterior changed a lot over the years. From when they first added a covered queue in 1972, they added that giant fast pass gate in 2000. Really changed the approach. They took out some planners. Then they added the big interactive queue in 2011. So the outside's changed a lot over the years, but the ride. The ride has changed as well, but we'll go into that in incredible detail, I'm sure, at some point. And at this point, we should also plug Foxy's book, Boundless Realms, which is great about the Haunted Mansion. And you should check that out. So back in Liberty Square proper, we'll head back to the town square, I guess you could call it. There are a couple of things worth seeing. There's the Liberty Bell, which is a replica of the Liberty Bell, which was added in 1989. This was kind of the tail end of the bicentennial celebrations of the Constitution. And they obtained, it's supposed to be an exact replica of the Liberty Bell from these molds that were made. And it is there surrounded by the 13 colony flags, which were originally, outside at the front of the land, like we said. And right next to it is the Liberty Tree, the Liberty Oak. As we have talked about Liberty Tree in past episodes, I won't dwell too much on this. The original was in Boston's Hanover Square. In 1765, patriots began to gather at the tree, gave speeches protesting this Stamp Act, and they would post cartoons and verses and would hang British officials in effigy and also hang lanterns in the tree. The original Boston tree was an elm. The Disney one is an oak. And it was found about 8 miles away on Disney property. And Bill Evans's landscaping team very famously moved this giant tree by kind of digging a hole, drilling a hole in it, and sticking a thing through and lifting it up and moving it. And it's lived. It has lived 50 years after that procedure. So their arborists really know what they're doing.
And Bill Evans is a real hero in a whole different realm for me, but the stuff he did was so incredible, and this was pretty revolutionary. I think the way he did it was kind of nuts at the time, and this worked out great.
Well, this is one of those things that would always get mentioned in PR stuff and would be in the Birnbaum book.
Right.
This is one of those things that Birnbaum would talk about, like in detail about how they moved the tree.
Right.
And so it's one of those like early Disney World factoids that is just like cemented in my brain because like Steve Birnbaum is like, let's take time out from telling you about the Magic Kingdom and talk about this tree because it's crazy. So yeah, there are some pictures. I've seen some pictures of them moving it, and it's pretty wild. So they did a good job with that, keeping it alive, and it's worked. Right next to it is the Liberty Tree Tavern, named after the Liberty Tree. This space is incredible.
Oh, yeah.
This is a place, each room has a large signature fireplace. Each room is named after a different founding father. There's the Adams Room, the Franklin Room, the Jackson Room, the Jefferson Room, the Madison Room, and the Washington Room. Each one sort of with period decor based on the different person about which they're named. There are also upstairs bathrooms, which are a delightful vestigial throwback to the early days before many regulations.
It's a unicorn, yeah. The only non-accessible bathrooms on property.
Yes, it's true. Yeah,
And quite an odd choice, but very, very quaint, yes.
I was thinking about this when I was writing out all these notes and things. I don't know why they put them up there. It doesn't make
Why
any
they
sense.
put them up there, and there's like a dead-end hallway that's very narrow, so that getting in and out is really
Yeah, you have
weird.
to like squeeze. It's like an airplane, like trying to get to the bathroom on an airplane, and you're kind of squeezing past people.
But I tell you what, it makes the entrance so cool because there's that stairway right there with the landing at the top. I mean, this place is definitely one of my favorite places in Walt Disney World. And it's something I really treasure as a Walt Disney World fan and hold up as kind of a special difference maker of the Magic Kingdom. I mean, the experience of going there and is just unique in the Disney world, I think.
Absolutely. It's a real throwback to that era of design. It's a design, a type of design that those Imagineers did very, very well. And, there's just like wood paneling everywhere. That landing at the top of the stairs that you were talking about with the wood everywhere. And it makes you feel like you're in an actual sort of guest house. There are rooms up there somewhere. And they call out people by their colony when they're calling the people to the tables. You get a special shout out if you're from one of the 13 colonies, which was always exciting for us. And, it's gone through incarnations of character meals and things, but like lunch there, just the a la carte lunch, very good. And just, you could not ask for a better atmosphere.
Well, and a lot of the windows look out on the courtyard with the Liberty Tree or even the back courtyard. So it really feels like you're not in the middle of a crowded theme park. It's kind of an interesting comparison to the atmosphere the Blue Bayou creates because you're comparing the lands. I mean, you feel like you're somewhere else in both places, I would say.
That's a great point. And it's really strange because it is located at a peak foot traffic nexus of the park. But when you sit in those little rooms and you look out the windows, it's these little perfectly framed. Man, those guys really knew what they were doing because everything's like perfectly framed little colonial courtyard or something like that. So it all looks good. Back in 1971, the food included shrimp, crab, and other seafood dishes, and sirloin steak topped with cheddar sauce. Desserts included Indian pudding, whatever that is.
Naturally.
And fruited brown Betty. They had entertainment. They had live entertainment back then. The tavern singers would perform there. And they seem to have only lasted a couple of years because I can't find mention of them after that. So
Proto Voices of Liberty, perhaps?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Could be. So that's definitely a space you should enjoy when you visit the Magic Kingdom. Next door is the Diamond Horseshoe, a spiritual successor to the Golden Horseshoe of Disneyland fame, which is a real Disneyland institution. It was a big deal at Disney World in its early days. You had to sprint to Liberty Square in the morning to get tickets for that day's show, as we no doubt remember those early morning travels, Liberty Square being the first destination to try and get it. Because you had to get reservations. It was free. It was a free show, but you had to get a ticket. And the only place to get that ticket was at the place in Liberty Square. So you had to make a beeline first thing in the morning, and we would go get them. And I didn't appreciate it at the time because they served just like cold sandwiches and stuff. Right. And that was not up to my culinary needs at the time.
I had the same reaction, and I live a life of regret now that I wasn't more grateful.
I know. I'm appreciating both cold sandwiches and the show that we would have missed. In its early years, this place was heavily based on the Disneyland show, the Golden Horseshoe. There was Pecos Bill character. Wally Bogue was actually there for the first few years of Walt Disney Operation, training people. And then there was Slewfoot Sue, and it was basically the Disneyland show. It was there from 1971 to 1986. It was replaced by the Diamond Horseshoe Jamboree, which ran from 86 to 95. This was kind of a similar deal. Cowboys and can-can girls. In 1995, it became the Diamond Horseshoe Saloon Review and Medicine Show.
Oh, wow.
Which is quite a title. It lasted till 2003. It no longer required reservations at this point. You could come and go whenever during the show. It also became counter service instead of table service. The previous iterations, a waitress would come around and, let you order food like sandwiches and chips and sodas and stuff like that. And then by this point, it was just you could come in and go up to the counter and get whatever you wanted. 2003, for a year, it was Goofy's Country Dancing Jamboree. This was a character show. Featured Chip and Dale making everyone do the electric slide.
Okay.
And had Woody, Jesse, and Bullseye from Toy Story doing Cotton Eye Joe.
No thanks.
Which Cotton Eye Joe became a real staple there for a while in the Magic Kingdom. And later used as a meet and greet venue and began serving food seasonally around 2016. So this facility is still there. It's not used as it once was. I'd love to see a real, the real Golden/Diamond Horseshoe show come back, Pecos Bill and all that stuff. That would be so much fun.
It's a glorious space. It's still beautiful in there. If you're lucky enough, for instance, if there's sometimes they open it for overflow for the Liberty Tree Tavern, I've heard, but if you ever get a chance to go to a very Merry Christmas party, it's open then. It's beautiful in there, and I always wonder, this is definitely a Disney World, Disneyland thing, where Golden Horseshoe stayed open and been an institution, and this one just couldn't quite find its way in the later decades. I wonder if it has something to do with the Hoop-Dee-Doo being kind of similar. It's so popular and beloved. But anyway, I do wish they would find something to go in here. They could put a great band in here, that great banjo band they have on the street. They could just play in the Diamond Horseshoe. But it's a beautiful facility, and I'd love to see it in use again in a normal everyday way.
Right. It was always such a thrill in the years that it was closed to go to something like the Christmas parties when it would be open and you could actually go in and look around. That was always super exciting. So, here's to bringing that back someday. And, getting right down to the end of the land, right next to that breezeway to Adventureland and crossing the tiny Mississippi River over into Frontierland. One more stop on our tour is the Tri-Cornered Hat Shoppy.
Ah, yes.
Which featured hats that were popular in colonial New England, it said, plus an exhibit dedicated to the fashion of yesterday's gentlemen's wigs. I don't know if that actually happened. That's what they said in 71 was going to be there. I don't know if that actually happened or not. It also carried just regular headgear. And, I tweeted about this store the other day, and Dad said this was where we have some pictures of Mom and Dad on their first Disney trip in the early 70s for their honeymoon, and wearing the traditional Disney World hats with the giant feathers in them.
Hey, all right.
This is where they got them. They got them there.
Makes sense.
The Tri-Cornered Hat Shoppy.
Well, it is a shoppy.
It is.
For hats.
A little bit of whimsy there, historical whimsy. By the 1980s, guide maps were listing this as part of Frontierland, even though it was Liberty Square. By 1991, it was called the Trail Creek Hat Shop. It is currently not in use, but the space is still there, and maybe someday we'll get some wigs in there if wigs make a big comeback.
Man, you got the Battle of the Lands, annexing shops.
Yeah, I'd like to know the story of how that happened, because in the nomenclature guides, it said it was part of Liberty Square, but the guide maps listed it as Frontierland, even though it clearly on the wrong side of the Mississippi. You can't steal that.
Come on, man. Why would you?
I don't know. Very strange, very strange. So those were the big establishments. Of course, over the years, there's been a lot of outdoor vending there. The silhouette carts are kind of a Liberty Square establishment, I guess you could say. Since the 80s, there's been an umbrella stand where you could get customized umbrellas or parasols. Also, the Madame Leota cart I mentioned. There's always been a popcorn stand there, as long as I can remember. It used to be old Uncle Orville Redenbacher. I remember in the 80s, and I looked it up, 1989, there was a stand that sold potatoes. The Great Idaho Baked Potato Company sold baked potatoes in Liberty Square.
Yeah, it looks like it's way out of theme, you know? It looks like something from Jules Verne or the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, exactly. Those patriots love their taters. And of course, over the years, there has been a lot of entertainment. There was a town crier back in '71 when this started. Town crier, fife and drum corps. Ben Franklin was there handing out wisdom, walking around with his like sassy wisdom.
It is gout.
And his gout. The fife and drum corps performed originally until about 1980. Did a ceremony called Sons and Daughters of Liberty, during which 2 children were inducted into the ranks of the Sons and Daughters of Liberty. This actually you can see a little bit of in The Magic of Walt Disney World from
That's right.
the 70s. So this is in there. The Fife and Drum Corps wound up going to Epcot for the American Adventure, but they would, a Fife and Drum Corps and Ben Franklin would reappear here and there over the years until they were laid off in a wave of cutbacks in early 2000. There was a big layoff of entertainment there, and the Fife and Drum Corps said farewell, as did Ben Franklin. And then, of course, the Corps at Epcot was let go in 2014. So no more Fife and Drum at Walt Disney World for the moment.
It's a bummer.
There was also a banjo duo in 1971 that played down at the Riverboat Landing, and a group called Aunt Polly's Trio in the mid-70s who performed on the Admiral Joe Fowler. So that's just a taste of some of the entertainment over the years. And that brings us to the end of our trip down memory lane.
It's a beautiful land. I mean, luckily, most we've talked a lot about a lot of changes. The exteriors, for the most part, are just the same as they always have been. So that's a real cool aspect of this land that's pretty unique.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a beautiful, beautiful place, and take some time to explore the next time you're in the Magic Kingdom.
So that wraps up this episode of Liberty Square and the Presidents. Before we leave, we need to remind you to be in touch with us. Our email is podcast@progresscityusa.com. And Michael, do we have any new Patreon backers this month?
We have a new member of our Patreon family. Major thanks, many thanks, to Grady, who joined in this month. We really appreciate it, Grady. Thanks for supporting the show, and to everyone else who's been supporting the show all along. We'll be having our first sort of special events, I think, towards the end of January. So join up if you want to have some fun. You can always join at patreon.com/ProgressCityUSA and find out about the goodies and the special things. And we already have special audio up for people. We have extended versions of our interviews from our Christmas shows we've put up, and some music and some other things. So there's more coming all the time.
We've only just begun to dream.
That's right. So thanks again to Grady, and thanks to everyone for subscribing.
So, Michael, what's up next?
Next month, we are going to step back from the park and take a look at the larger view. We're going to take a look at the Walt Disney World Resort as it was in 1971. Some of the things that have graced the resort in those years, in those early years. So some wonderful hotels, the wonderful Fort Wilderness, and we'll just talk about what it's like to be at the resort back in the day.
Oh, man, I'm excited about this. The Vacation Kingdom. It's one of my favorite aspects of Walt Disney World is these original properties.
Absolutely. So I'm really excited to talk about it. We're going to have some special guests, and it should be fun.
So stay tuned. And like Michael said, please sign up to our Patreon because the fun is just beginning there. So we look forward to seeing you soon. Until then, stay safe. Happy New Year to everyone. And we'll meet again in February. So long.
Right now, it's time to go. Remember,
everything you've seen here in our all-electric city is really possible today.
So if you know any cities looking for a new springtime of progress, tell them about Progress City. Thanks for joining us.
They call it progress, progress. Our time is at an end. We'll be seeing you again next time at progress, progress. We'll meet in Progress City, USA. You've been listening to the Progress City Radio Hour, created by the folks at ProgressCityUSA.com. We're also on Facebook and Twitter at Progress City USA. If you want to contact us, please write podcast at ProgressCityUSA.com. The Progress City Radio Hour is recorded at Arbor Ridge Studios in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, on the web at arborridgestudios.com. The title theme was composed by Jeff Crawford, whose music can be found at jeffcrawfordmusic.com. Please join us again soon for another Progress City Radio Hour. They call it progress.